press the button. And can you see it on your side where it says, does it say on your side live?
It does.
Maybe. This is technology. We're in the future, right? We're in the future. So this is what I do, right? Now what I'm going to do, okay, just so you know, I'm fancy. I've got 2 laptops, okay? And you like my music, right? It's like you're in a waiting room. You're in a waiting room. It's beautiful, right?
Okay.
Okay. So now what I do, right? And I see people are here. I see Pizzona's here. Thank you so much for being here. Maybe. So now what I do is I go on my other laptop. I'm going to go to Twitter. I'm going to go to my Twitter feed. Okay. So now what I've got to do.
Now I'm following you. I'm doing what you do.
Okay. So now, no, you don't have to do what I do. You don't have to do what I do. I want you to sit back and just relax and enjoy everything. Enjoy the music. Like you're in an elevator. Like you're in an elevator and we're going up to the top. So now what I'm going to do, right, is I'm going to go to my Twitter feed. Okay. I go to my Twitter feed, right? I got to go to profile. And I go to my Twitter feed. And I've got to scroll down. So now I'm scrolling down. Now what I do is it's not here yet. It's not here. This is very annoying to me. It's, you know, and I'm such a tranquil person. Listen to my music. I'm a tranquil person. But when I'm waiting for this, I'm like, come on, go already. So now what I do is I refresh. Okay. So now that I refresh, it's still not there. It's still not there. Can you believe that?
What happens? It's like we don't exist.
You know what? Maybe we don't. Okay. So now what I do is I refresh again. Okay. Because this causes me a lot of anxiety, right? And oh, look at this. Janan Glasgow. She says, I see you, Grandpa. And she says, get your M&Ms because, thank you, Janan, because I do eat M&Ms after every single one of these. And maybe you're here. Maybe. I don't know. So now what I do, right, is so now I go, because I got distracted. When I saw that with M&Ms, I got a little bit crazy. So now what I do is I go back to my feed. And I am, hold on for a second. I'm going to do it one more time because now I'm on YouTube also. Did you know that? I'm on YouTube. Look, I just gave the laptop to my wife. All right. Because we're a team. We're a team at this.
Maybe she can figure this out.
You know what? I know. That's what I'm counting on because I'm not good at it. So now she's like navigating because of all the wires I've got set up over here. So it's kind of like she's like, there's a whole bunch of landmines that she's trying to tiptoe through. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click live one last time. And I see Rising Serpent is here. Maybe. Don't fall for it just. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. And I'm going to go back. And we did it. We're live.
Woo!
Isn't that awesome?
You're a miracle worker.
I am. Thank you so much. I feel like that now. Okay, so now what I do is step 2, right? Is I turn down my music.
Thank God. Whew.
No way. That music was great.
Okay.
It really was, Nancy. Isn't it? This is the Hanuman Chalisa. Very important. It's a devotional poem. 500 years old. Isn't that awesome?
Now I feel that.
No. So now what I do is I'm going to turn it down. Okay? Like technology sees.
Awesome.
And now, you know what? We did it. We're live. I'm so happy. This is exciting. This is awesome, right?
It's outstanding.
It really is. So thank you so much. I've been hunting you down now, right? I've been hunting you down like for about 2 months. I've been DMing you for about 2 months to say, let's do this.
Well, we had one scheduled and then I didn't realize the time involved, which I should have because I know from your other ones, but this just worked out perfectly. So thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity and hounding me. I'm happy to be here.
No. Thank you so much for joining me and everybody else here. And we've got so much to talk about. But before we do, talk about anything. Oh, look, I see Wizard Predicts is also here. And Wizard Predicts said hello to my wife, Nancy. And Julie, do you know Wizard Predicts?
I think I do. I maybe just followed him on Twitter. Maybe.
Wiz Predicts is awesome. And it's Wizard _ Predicts. And we'll talk a little bit about them, I'm sure, probably later, because I go to Twitter, right? And I rely on other people to curate my reality. And you're a part of that. You're very helpful to me in helping me curate my reality because it's so complex, it's so intricate, it's so kind of like fragmented and tangled that I create like this ad hoc, right? I pick and choose from a whole bunch of different places. Wizard Predicts is one of them. You're one of them. That's how we met. You're one of them. You're part of my reality.
I apologize.
No, you're awesome. We're going to talk about it, but would you be kind enough to spend a little bit of time introducing yourself? Would that be all right, Julie?
Yes, it would be. Thank you so much for having me on. And for those of you who don't know me, I don't know, then you must not be on Twitter very much because it's where I spend a lot of my time. I'm a senior contributor for American Greatness. That's amgreatness.com. And I write a lot about politics. And my most recent issues, and I'm sure Adam and I will be talking about that, is the investigation into the January 6th Capitol chaos, riot, whatever you want to call it. I've also been covering some of the election fraud, illegalities. What else? What else am I talking about? Oh my gosh, lockdowns. I think that's how we first connected, Adam, is that we were part of a very small handful of people who were right away initially opposed to the lockdowns, the 15-day to stop the spread, which I think we're on our 367th day, maybe, of that. But I do think that that's how we first connected. So I've been covering that issue for over a year. So that's me. I'm in my home in suburban Chicago. Unfortunately, it's been a rainy, cold week. But yes, so I'm excited to be here. I know we have a lot of ground to cover, and I hope we get some good questions. Oh, and by the way, those who know me, I do have my reinforcements, so I don't do M&Ms.
Oh no, M&Ms are awesome, but that's like my thing. I don't drink any alcohol. I've never really been a big alcohol. I have never been a big alcohol drinker because I've always been like a big alcohol kind of thrower upper. It just never it never stays. It never stays with me for a little bit, and I've had some. I remember a lot of times that I've thrown up. You know that? I get like flashbacks of it,
right?
And kind of awkward moments. I mean, just
well,
really bad.
So there.
Oh, that's awesome. So we first met. Actually, do you know it was almost exactly a year ago because it was you, it was me, it was
Jordan.
It was Jordan Schachtel. It was, and hopefully I'm saying his name right because he's a wonderful person. I subscribe to his Substack, and he's a smart guy. And it was Robert Barnes, Ron Coleman. There's only a handful of us, wasn't there? There was only Alex Berenson, I guess. We were the anti-lockdowners. We were the true dissenters, right? And I can't say that time has proven us right or wrong because I look at it from a different way these days. I'm like an advanced intelligence these days because I'm so focused on it. But you and I and a few others were kind of giving big like warnings, like Danger Will Robinson type of warnings that I think we all suspected that this was not going to end.
Right. I think that's true. And I know you and I even talked about that recently, even coming out about what we saw was coming before the official lockdown, which was really March 16th. But we knew that the data was wrong. We knew that unfortunately the president was putting his trust in people who did not deserve his trust. And I think that we've been sort of right about that. But I wouldn't have predicted we would still be where we are today, a year later. And I would never have guessed that my two daughters would still be basically trying to learn remote in college and in high school. So we can get into the details, but I think it's just heartbreaking and tragic what's happened over the last year.
I thought we would be exactly where we are now, kind of. I didn't expect all the cruelty of the elites. I don't think that anybody could have really forecast the amount of violence, the amount of disruption, and kind of their enjoyment of it, right? And you saw the Periscope I did with Lee Smith, who's awesome. And, he was really elegant about it, because it's hard to take all of the cruelty and to, people have so many thoughts about what's going on, about what's going on right now at this moment in history. But the way the mind works is it's so complicated and it's so convoluted once it's circulating in the mind that it's very difficult to express it. And I think he did it best. Him and, do you know Sundance, the last refugee from Conservative Treehouse?
Yeah, of course.
And Sundance is awesome. And right after I did the Periscope with Lee, Sundance DM'd me and he was like, that's exactly the best way to put it, is they want us to know. He said exactly what Lee Smith said. They want us to know. He said, they want us to know this is not hypocrisy. This is a classist system. And in a classist system, you don't have that hypocrisy. You have kind of the two sides of you have the inside and the outside of the green zone. And they want to let you know which side you're on. They want to let us know that we're on the outside of the green zone.
Well, and I think Lee has such a unique perspective, aside from the fact he's just a remarkably talented journalist and writer. And his gift really is he could take very complicated subject matter and make it digestible to regular people, which is a very rare skill that he has. But look, he covered the Middle East for a long time, so he's very aware of what regimes are capable of. And of course, he covered everything related to the Iran nuclear deal. He knows how the Obama folks roll. He knows how they weaponize these agencies and also hijack the media, which isn't hard to do. So he really, he's right. They're not trying to cover this up. This is part of the fear campaign. They want us to know what they're capable of. They want us to know that they're heartless, immoral people. They disguise it as though they're not. But their actions show otherwise. And it's not just political leaders like Andrew Cuomo or Gavin Newsom who have shown that, but of course the nameless, faceless bureaucrats who are really responsible for the oppressive rules that we continue to live under.
Yeah, and in fact, he even mentioned John Kerry. And I thought that was odd, because he mentioned John Kerry about the plane. And I guess that Periscope was a bit over a month ago. It was a really excellent Periscope. And I'm going to get distracted, but that's what I do. He even said, I remember he said, he asked me about a constitution of a country that he's kind of, written about. I forget what country in the Middle East it was. And he said, they have a beautiful constitution. And he said, you know what, but it doesn't make a difference, because although they've got a beautifully drafted constitution, it's not being kind of constitutionally followed. And
I think, is it Lebanon? I wonder.
It is. He said a lot of things. We're going to do part 2 with that.
Great.
And I want to say hi to Patracy. Thank you so much for joining us. Who's joining us from Europe? Isn't that awesome?
Cheers.
I know. That's a drinking game. I thought it was very interesting when you said they want us to know. And then Sundance DM'd me, and Sundance said, that's exactly it. And then they wrote a post about it in their own in the Conservative Treehouse, and then they also shared with me some other type of journalism articles that try and express that same type of thing, that we're really building a classist system right in front of us. So I thought that's how I met you. Did you know that? You're in I call it a chronic. I call it my log of the fastest roll-up of power in history. I still call it my COVID log, but it's so much more. You're in it, because you were so helpful, because instead of me having to write what you wrote it for me. So all I needed to do was to take it from there and put it in my log. I'm not worrying about attributions or anything like that at this point, because it's a link, right? It's the link, and I had to hard copied it. Everything I do is hard copied. Right. But I've got I'm up to almost 2 terabytes of information now. I've had to download everything. Every single physical thing I've had to download. Right. So you were in there, and it was you and I and a few other people against the world, and we were right. I think we were right. Time will tell, but I think we were right.
I feel like we're already vindicated, to be honest. And so we know now how destructive the lockdowns have been. We know we have comparative data, but we also have anecdotal examples, say between Florida and California. I mean, what is going to happen to the state of California, and how much more land is Ron DeSantis going to have to annex because of all the people who are planning to move to Florida, myself included? And so we have enough information right now to not only know that the lockdowns were devastating, catastrophic on so many levels, but they also didn't work. And I think, Adam, that was for me really the beginning of my skepticism, is having reported on the scientific community for years, knowing how hyper partisan they were, knowing that all of their past failures, especially related to climate change, their failed, flawed models, their garbage data that they relied on, and never having to be accountable for all the doomsday warnings that they told people about. And you could just see from the start, this was right up their alley. And they knew that they could say and do anything they wanted. There'd be no culpability. You know, nothing's going to happen to Anthony Fauci or Deborah Birx or Robert Redfield or Jerome Adams, the Surgeon General, for all the terrible advice that they gave, all the bad data that they've given us. Look what's happening this week. Now, all of a sudden, 6 feet of distancing. Oh, we don't need that. That's just, who was talking about that to begin with? Now it's 3 feet. Well, of course, that's not rooted in anything scientific either. And it's only a matter of time before all of this will be put to the wayside, but no one will have to explain why they forced this on us to begin with. And of course, not just our country, but around the world.
There will be no history. Did you know that? There's not going to be a history. And it's interesting because for people who are choosing to be observant of all of this, which takes some effort, right? It really does take a lot of kind of intellectual inquisitiveness. You really have to really want to pursue the truth of this moment. And the way they're imprinting history, I think, is so interesting. My favorite of all of them, as horrible as it was the National Guard was just so explicit in that they had all of those images of the National Guard in DC. Right. And who there was no rational or reasonable reason for them to be there. I mean, we know this. However, because it's so complex, there's no way for us to explain it to our grandchildren or to our relatives or to future generations. Right. We will not even have the collateral to support our argument that it was unnecessary. So, you know, I know in real time it was a Monty Python sketch that we were observing, but they're imprinting history. So I think that that's also very interesting.
It is. And I mean, it's a hard time to try to explain any of this to your children. I have a high schooler and then a college student, and it's really difficult to explain what's going on so many levels. The race war, their fears about people judging them for their political beliefs, people judging them for their race, and then certainly what's happening with the government. And you know, what our college kids and high schoolers are going through, unless you have a child who's dealing with this right now, a lot of people just have no idea. I mean, I had a niece just a few weeks ago. She spent 9 nights in an isolation dorm at a public university in the South for simply testing positive for COVID. She couldn't see anyone in person for 9 days. She tested positive, but did not have one symptom. Oh my God. She couldn't even go outside, Adam. She couldn't even leave this isolation dorm. It's like solitary confinement. We would not do this to prisoners, but we are doing this to college students across the country. Not to mention what we're doing to high schoolers and, of course, grade schoolers. All the lost opportunities, falling behind educationally, while they are really just being held hostage by teachers' unions in the Democratic Party, Joe Biden and his team as well. You know, I hope our kids' only takeaway from this is that these people cannot be trusted. These Democratic politicians, leader, a lot of Republicans too, certainly public health experts in the scientific community, they simply cannot be trusted. And so I hope that's the only takeaway, because they've lost so much already.
How old are your daughters?
I have a 20-year-old. She is a junior at a private college in upstate New York. And then I have a junior in high school. And she just told me today she was so excited because she got chosen to go to their first football game tomorrow night. They haven't had any football, of course, now for over a year. And she's finally going to get to go to a high school football game. And they're expected to go back to classes 4 days a week starting March 29th. She walked out of her school, I think March 14th or 15th last year, and has not been back to a normal class, a normal high school situation in over a year. And so, you know, it's they have good circumstances, my daughter. You know, they obviously have a good family, and we have certain opportunities that other people don't, but it's even a struggle for kids, I think, in the best circumstances. And that's what broke my heart from the beginning, knowing that kids who were not in good circumstances, what they were going to be suffering, and they still are. And it's tragic.
It is. And there's so much for us to talk about, because I'm thinking of all these other things. There's just so much, because you become such an important part of, again, that reality that I permit into my mind, right? And you've been one of the few people that's been writing about, is it Sicknick? Is that his name, Sicknick?
Yes.
And about the January 6th. I guess it's fair to call it a riot, right? I guess it was a riot, but you know, you know, for want of a better word, however much it was instrumentalized, it was still kind of a riot, right? I guess.
Right. Parts of it were. I mean, there was definitely a location outside of the Capitol where it definitely turned rowdy and in some instances violent. So I guess I would call that part of it a riot. But for the most part, what was happening inside, with few exceptions, again, you'd be hard pressed to call that a riot. And I mean, it was over in a matter of a couple of hours. So it's not to dismiss the violence that happened there, the attacks on police, the vandalization of property, but what's happening with our Justice Department and what they are doing, what they've turned this into. When you have the Attorney General of the United States compare what happened on January 6th to the 1995 Oklahoma bombing massacre that killed 168 people, including more than a dozen babies under the age of 6. That's such an egregious, irresponsible, reckless statement, but it speaks to the mindset of what we're dealing with at the U.S. Department of Justice, and what's happening there to certain Americans. It is really frightening.
Did they actually use that language?
Yes.
Did they explicitly say that?
Merrick Garland said that in his confirmation hearing. He compared the Capitol riot, as he called it, to the Oklahoma City bombing, which he was apparently involved in the prosecution of Timothy McVeigh and Nichols, not Tom Nichols, sorry, not the Never Trumper, sorry, John Nichols. Anyway, the two.
Nichols. I was like, that's the hockey player. Is that Bernie Nichols? Who's a hockey player? Yeah, no. Or is that? I think that's Elton John's real name.
Oh gosh. Oh, you might be right.
I think I was right, because it's in my head.
Well,
I had no idea. Now, here's something interesting. As from my kind of chronicle, right, the history of this moment, the fastest roll-up of power in history, I call. Starting in early March, they started calling COVID. They started using the terms of war.
That's right.
So, do you remember noticing that? Even Trump. I think it was like on March 16th, even said something about it being a war. Angela Merkel, you know, called it a war herself, but, you know, they're German. So everything to them is like an unfought war, a war that must be avenged or won.
Right.
But they were using that language. Boris Johnson has been using the language of war. I've seen somewhat of the language of war being used to the riots, but I haven't heard it being so kind of inflammatory as that. That's incredible.
It was, I mean, how insulting to the surviving family members of the people who died at Oklahoma City that day. I mean, all of us remember the horror of hearing what happened, because it was the first, terrorist attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. So for Merrick Garland to make that comparison, furthermore, to have 20 Republican senators approve of that statement by voting to confirm him and put him in a position of power, I don't understand that either, but I don't understand a lot of what Republicans in the Senate do. But that is sort of the cover and justification for this wide-ranging investigation. It's really important for Americans to know what's happening. They are rounding up Americans across the country. They are transporting these defendants, mostly charged with initially misdemeanor charges, but also adding enhancement felony charges. We can get into the details of one of the most common felony charges. They are transporting them to Washington, D.C. They are denying them bail. They are violating the Speedy Trial Act. A judge just approved that for several of the defendants. In some cases, they're denied public defenders because the justice system in DC, where they're running all the cases out of, is so overloaded that they're running short on public defenders. Now, Adam, these are not wealthy people. These are regular Americans, most of whom went there for the right reasons. Maybe they got caught up in, what the atmosphere of what was happening that day. Some of them definitely went there to cause trouble. Some of them deserve to have the book thrown at them. But we're talking about some people who didn't even enter the Capitol building, who are being charged, with these really outlandish offenses from the Justice Department. And you have judges that are going along with this, overturning state judges who are releasing these defendants, overturning them and telling them they should be denied bond, mostly because they're a threat to the community, because they, and this is definitely true, and I've seen it in charging documents and heard it from judges, because they doubt the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. This has turned into a thought crime.
Wow. Everything he said is just, it's hard for me to take in. Nancy, have you been listening to this?
Yes.
Nancy's on the other computer now doing her thing.
It's incredible.
Nancy says it's incredible too. Did you know any of this?
Yeah, I've heard people compare it to, believe it or not, 9/11.
Did everybody hear that? Nancy said that she's heard people compare it to 9/11.
Yes, I've heard that too. And when you see the comments of reporters, other reporters, not people like me, but the political reporters or whoever, the comments from people who want, I think that there are a lot of Americans who want anybody who is at the Capitol on January 6th, I think they'd be happy to see them executed. That's not an exaggeration. These people really feel that the people who are there are traitors, seditionists, because those are the terms that Democrats and Republicans have used, and of course the media. So they view these people as traitors. They view them now as domestic terrorists. In fact, there was a raid in southwestern Florida over the weekend. A man who was cooperating with the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force barricaded this man's street, unleashed this very theatrical raid on his house, had tanks, had people in SWAT gear, raided his house, dragged him out, arrested him, and he's charged with various misdemeanors and then this enhancement charge, which is called obstruction of an official proceeding, that they are accusing about 80 people so far of doing, which is felony.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. And it's just so amazing to me. I think today, when I do my log, I haven't even told Nancy this, but when I do my log, I think of it a lot as Anne Frank. I was, I somehow as a kid, and I'm 54. So for me as a kid, my era, right? You would have libraries and you'd go into them and you'd kind of peruse them. And just a book that I magically took off the shelf was Anne Frank, right? Diary of Anne Frank. And so I think about that as this moment, and kind of this Anne Frank type of moment where everyone has to keep a log because it's so disorienting and kind of everything is being displaced so violently. Today I saw George Bush. This was my newest inclusion, right? Apparently George Bush did some type of an interview. I never liked George Bush, just so you know. George Bush did an interview at the South by Southwest conference virtually. And he said how abhorrent he thought the riot on January 6th was. And I didn't even capture all the language of it because I just wanted to make sure it was inside my chronicle.
Good to know.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. It's amazing that I've also seen the language of warfare being changed, where it used to be, we were going to bomb Afghanistan until they let the Kurds live, or whatever the excuse. They've given us so many over the last 20 years, right? But now it's all about spreading democracy. And I'm like, holy crap, now they want to spread democracy in America. I don't want them spreading democracy in America. It's crazy.
No, thank you. It would be interesting for someone to ask George Bush why there's so many military veterans who were at the Capitol that day. And that's something that I'm working on right now. We are talking about a lot of veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan war who were involved in the chaos to varying degrees that day. I'd like someone to ask George Bush what he thinks about that, because he's the guy who sent them there. He's the one who promised that we would spread democracy across the world. He's the one who let those people languish, right? He's the one who then brought them back. And now what's George Bush doing to take care of the hundreds of thousands, millions of veterans that he created? What's he doing to help them? I saw he just hired Deborah Birx. Some George W. Bush Foundation just hired her. What's he doing to help? What's his wife doing? How about Dick Cheney? We know what Liz Cheney is doing. So there were an alarming percentage of veterans who were involved in what happened at the Capitol that day. I'm working on that story right now. And I would love some answers from the Bush people, for people that they brought into the military. Obviously, they're sworn to uphold their defense of the country. They were sent overseas. They were kind of hung out to dry. And, we still have thousands of U.S. soldiers over there. And now they've come back and they feel betrayed by their country. And I think they have a reason to. So that's pretty nervy of George Bush to open his mouth about that.
Yeah, and there's so much to talk about, because now I've got to go backwards, because I've got other questions that I wanted to ask you before, but I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, as Sicknick, that's his name, right? So I learned about. I have my kind of chronicle now has, I would say, probably about 70 categories, like things that I drop like buckets into, and it's no longer even close to just being about COVID. It's Black Lives Matter. It's about propaganda. It's about rhetoric. It's about so much. I've got a team that's helping me out. So it's for the science part, where there's a lot of complexity to it and a lot of nuances. I've actually had to engage with the team there. But I saw you and Darren Beatty have been the only ones kind of reliably discussing Sicknick in real time.
Right.
There's just a lack of, I don't know, is there a lack of evidence, or how do you think of it?
It was, I know Darren Beatty also did that. I think Raheem Kassem did too. I think the National Pulse did some work on that too. But we're really the only outlets, or only reporters, journalists who have been covering this. But there were plenty of reasons to be suspicious from the very beginning about the Brian Sicknick story, not the least of which we were told by the media that this happened. And of course, they had all the theatrics about the funeral, not procession, but the police procession after he was killed. But how this story got seeded was by a story in the New York Times on January 8th, based on two anonymous law enforcement officials. And the New York Times reported that Brian Sicknick was killed by Trump loyalists, that was their term, bludgeoned to death by Trump loyalists with a fire extinguisher. So of course, that was all the proof the media needed. So this spread like wildfire. Everyone from the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, every cable outlet repeated it. Obviously, local news, every pundit, even some on the right, repeated that as fact. But it turns out none of it was true. So some of us started asking questions right away. Well, where's the report? Where's the evidence that he was killed by a fire extinguisher? Didn't exist. Then suddenly I went back and looked at the New York Times reporting. All of a sudden, when they were talking about Officer Sicknick's remains being laid in state, as you'll recall, the weekend before the impeachment trial, all of a sudden they changed their tune. They didn't bring up the fire extinguisher story in their reporting. So it was sort of this subtle change over time. And then CNN, to their credit, which they don't deserve a lot, but I will give them this, they reported that these officials were saying there was no evidence that he suffered any blunt trauma. There was also no evidence that he suffered any allergic reaction to any sort of spray, like a pepper spray or bear spray. So a few of us really started hammering that. And then on February 12th, the New York Times very quietly, they called it an update, but they basically retracted the entire story and said, oh, we have updated information. And it turns out that's basically not the case. They're still investigating what happened to him. To this day, we still do not know how Brian Sicknick died, if it had anything to do with the events of January 6th. The DC Medical Examiner's Office refuses now to release the autopsy or toxicology report. What are we now? 8, 9, 10 weeks after I think maybe 9 weeks after he died. We still don't have any information. But the sick part, Adam, is how the media, Democrats and a lot of Republicans just exploited that man's death. He was only 42 years old, exploited it for political purposes. And now no one even cares. No one wants to find out the truth.
Yeah, it is amazing. I want to find out the truth. And it's very interesting because I don't think there really is ever going to be any truth in that. I think that ultimately that small cabal is going to make some type of a boastful type of declamation in a month or two saying, you know what, we had to do this again to fortify the green zone and this was needed. I think somehow they're going to give themselves some attributive type of qualities into that whole thing as well. But I think it's important that it's important for me to watch the way history is being distorted. I remember 2001 so well. My wife was actually taking pictures. She was called in by the governor to take pictures the day after, September 12th. She was actually taking pictures in, what was it called? Ground Zero. She was taking pictures. And I knew that war, that when we entered Iraq, I'm just getting my second laptop ready, so I'm a little bit distracted.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, because I'm running out of juice. I knew when we were going into Iraq that I felt like we were never going to get out. I felt that it was inevitable. And I thought that was really interesting is I'm a Democrat, is the language that was being used was the Democrats were apparently very vocally and visibly protesting against it. And part of what I kind of absorbed, and I guess I kind of projected and carried forward myself, was that the Republicans were using the rhetoric of fear, and they were using kind of a campaign of fear in order to get Americans. And I was like, how can people be so stupid that they're allowing themselves to be scared into an endless type of war? And here we are again. And it's interesting to me because there are still a lot of people who think that there really were weapons of mass destruction, even though it's been, there was the Chiclat report. I'm not sure if you ever bumped into that, but it was amazing. The Chiclat report, which slammed Tony Blair. And then there was a U.S. Senate report. And both of which said, listen, we weren't lying, but it just, we messed everything up, but we weren't lying about it. So, they covered themselves, but they were lying, but not lying. However, you can kind of the legalese in order to accommodate that. I feel like Sicknick is a perfect example of a WMD. I feel like he's the WMD.
Right. Well, we have so many examples of this. I kind of wrote about that in my book also about Never Trumpers. And my biggest comparison, you had the same neocons who told us about, and I'm a recovering neocon. So you said you're a Democrat. No. I was a neocon. Yeah, so I was a Bush fan. I was a big follower of Bill Kristol's, defended the Cheneys, when everybody wanted them, at some military tribunal for war crimes. I still defended them. But you saw the same neocons who pushed WMDs also pushing Russian collusion. And so it was interesting to see the same cabal who lied about the existence of WMDs, also lying about this idea that Donald Trump's campaign colluded with the Kremlin to influence the outcome of the election. Now, of course, that's another lie. Have they apologized for that? No. Have they repented? No. Have they asked for forgiveness to all the people, including Donald Trump, who they smeared and ridiculed and condemned as criminals? No. These people just keep moving right along, and it's going to be the same situation with what happened with COVID and the lockdowns. All the people who inflicted this pain on regular Americans, on the entire country, they'll never apologize, and they'll certainly never be held accountable. And that's a real problem in this country. And you just brought up WMDs. But our political ruling class continuing to get away with lying and misleading the American people, whether it's lying to put us into war or lying to try to get rid of a sitting president or lying about a virus and mitigation measures. This is a real problem in this country because there doesn't seem to be any way to hold these people accountable in any court of law or even politically. And that's why they keep getting away with it. It's really disheartening.
It's interesting, and there's so many questions here, and I feel bad because I could just keep on going with questions because I have so many to ask you in your perspective. I'm going to ask you one, and then we're going to have to start getting to other people's questions because they're just so interesting. I did a Periscope with Amanda Milius. Do you know Amanda?
Yes.
Amanda's awesome. It went 4.5 hours. I
know, I heard that. I am not going to be here for 4.5 hours, so.
Maybe. That's what Amanda said also.
Shorter pizza a little bit, yeah.
But it's interesting because she said that when she was making the movie, she felt like she was putting it she was creating that time capsule, and she was creating the artifacts for the time capsule. And a lot of that has to be kind of the awareness that you're not going to be able to change people's minds now. Right. So you're not as much interested in kind of any alteration on the reality now, right? You can't alter reality now because you're competing against the media and how much mind share the media has and how they've kind of taken they've taken over all the leases in the mull inside people's heads, right? But it is important to have that time capsule for tomorrow. So how much of what you're writing now, for example, about Signet, are you trying to arm yourself so that you can kind of combat, I hate to say it, but like on the YouTube where they say own the libs, right? You know how they do that on YouTube, like Ben Shapiro or something? Are you kind of, how much of your journalism is kind of to own the libs and just so that people can kind of better articulate what's going on now, which is kind of hard to do, right? Versus creating a historical record for a year or 2 years from now when people really need to look back and say what's happened to us.
I don't really consider it any kind of historical account. I think a lot of what I do is trying to give voice to, I would say, not really the voiceless, but the people who are unfairly under attack. So one of my first articles about Russian collusion was on Carter Page, and I interviewed him and I started telling his story. I also wrote a lot about Devin Nunes and what he was doing and how he was under attack, not just by the libs. Look, here's my argument about the left. We know what the left is capable of. We can deal with the left. We know exactly what their agenda is. We know what their goals are. We know that they will do anything to get a hold of power. My biggest issue is with Republicans and these never Trump conservatives, as they call themselves, who always side with the left, because I think they're far more, not dangerous, but more malicious, I think, even than the left. So I call those people out more than the libs. But I think that's sort of my angle for writing. And I think that's why I wrote a lot about lockdowns and the damage that would be done, not for me, because quite frankly, my family, aside from school, was fine. Economically, we were fine. But I was trying to give some kind of insight into what was the people who were going to suffer. And I think that also drives my coverage of the January 6th defendants. There are a lot of people who don't want to touch this issue because they view these people as deplorables. I did Mark Levin's radio show last night, and he was sort of not astonished, but it's sort of jaw dropping to talk about this and what's happening. And he asked me why other people weren't covering it. I don't have an answer for that, except that I think that there are a lot of journalists and pundits who don't want to touch this because these people are sort of beneath them. They're sort of the MAGA people, and they're, the Florida man, and they're just well, I don't care. I mean, they're people they're entitled to their day in court. They're entitled to being adjudicated through a fair system of justice. They shouldn't be targeted because they're Trump supporters or they wear MAGA hats or whatever it is. And so I think that is honestly what drives a lot of what I cover, not to pat myself on the back, but I'm not trying to make any historical account. It's interesting. I kind of said the same thing to Scott Atlas. He's another person that I've been covering and interviewing and trying to get his story, not get his story out, but at least defend him a little bit because of the onslaught against him. And I said, I think history is going to treat you more kindly than now. And he said, Julie, I don't care about history right now. I'm trying to make changes now because what's happening now is so destructive. I don't care how history thinks of
Can
me.
you tell me who Scott Atlas is? I'm sorry. Can you tell me who Scott Atlas is? I have no idea.
Sure. So Scott Atlas was Donald Trump's last coronavirus advisor. Unfortunately, he wasn't the first one. But he is the Stanford doctor who has been speaking out about lockdowns and all these mitigation measures from the beginning. So he was Donald Trump's last coronavirus advisor. He actually did a really interesting roundtable today with Ron DeSantis. He advised him last fall too, which I think helped DeSantis, find his ground a little bit and open up the state last September. So, but he's been absolutely vilified by the media and by people like Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx. But it's really too bad that he didn't have Donald Trump's ear last March instead of in September, October, because things would have looked a lot differently. So
there's gonna be a lot of questions, and I want to get to them, and they're all so interesting. And I still have so many questions. It's such an interesting thing because we're doing kind of the exact same thing. It's just that you're a great journalist, right? And I've gone through so much of your back, the back articles that you've done with Chris and with American Greatness, right? And
yeah.
I hate to say it's an honor to be in my chronicle because that there's a lot of vanity to that, but it's true. It is an honor. I'm very careful about what I let in because it's got to be unimpeachable. And so there are a few opinion pieces or pieces that kind of have opinions kind of carefully infused in, right? And but I've got to be extremely careful what I let in because, again, it's got to be unimpeachable because I want this to be the historical record and I want to leave as much of your article intact as I can, and it's entirely intact. It's got to be unimpeachable. It can't be something that in 2 years or even tomorrow, if I were to show it to people where they say, well, this isn't right, that jeopardizes everything I'm working on. So there's a lot of questions here, and I'm going to have a lot more for you. And I want it. And I'm going to have to switch my laptops. I told you about that, right? I told you before we went on, I'm going to have to switch my laptops.
That's fine. It's bothering me.
So if I disappear for a second, don't panic. I'm here. I've got everything set up on my other side. So M. Fox Hunter, thank you so much for joining us. Says, why did Trump advocate for lockdowns and push vaccines when his base was opposed to them?
Okay. So this was, I think, the hardest part about coming out so early against lockdowns because the president did support the lockdowns initially. And so it was really hard for all, here we had just come through impeachment. The president was flying high. Everybody felt so great about November. He was going to win in a landslide. The economy was buzzing. Even the Democrats were panicked about Joe Biden being the nominee. And then here comes, coronavirus and lockdowns. And so I wish I had a good answer. I do think that he just took terrible advice from Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx. So when they put together the first 15 days to flatten the curve, stop the spread, whatever it was, I think he went along with it like, okay, this sounds rational. He saw what was happening in New York City, obviously his hometown, and that was alarming to him. And so I think that you had all these scientists and experts who were saying, look, we just need 15 days. We need to make sure that we can bulk up up our PPE and that we can make sure we need enough ventilators. Another huge mistake that was made early on by healthcare providers. But anyway, the biggest mistake, aside from the first 15 days, was when Birx and Fauci went to him with the flawed Neil Ferguson models from Imperial College UK, and also the Christopher Murray models out of University of Washington, IHME, that predicted all of these deaths. 2 million fatalities, I believe, was Neil Ferguson's first initial prediction of total fatalities. And that was just through the summer. That wasn't even the entire year. So I do believe that that really rattled Donald Trump. I think he had people in the White House who wanted him to go along with the continued shutdown into April. If you will remember, though, he was pushing to try to open the economy by Easter, which was mid-April. And I think he had advisors who were telling him no to that as well. And by that point, though, it was too late. And so as far as vaccines, I'd like to talk a lot about that a little separately, because I have a piece up on Friday about vaccine skepticism and where it's coming from and why I think it's justified. But anyway, Donald Trump's biggest mistake of his presidency, in my opinion, hands down, it's not even close, was actually moving to shut down those first 15 days and then add on to it the end of March of 2020. Just a politically fatal mistake that he made. I don't know why he did it. That's the extent of what I know.
Yeah. And you said about I switched laptops. Can you tell?
Yes. You look so fresh.
Do I really?
Yes. You look re-energized.
Oh wow, Nancy, I like that. I like that. Cool. Thanks.
We're all
Okay.
charged up now. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So you said about the vaccines, and I'll tell you, right before this, I overheard my wife, one of my wife's conversations, and in it, she was discussing with one of her friends, I guess, about which vaccine they've chosen.
Okay.
I think it was something like, which one of the vaccines have you chosen? Isn't it interesting now that maybe it's an Overton window? I don't know. You're the journalist. You tell me if that's the Overton window or not. But that everybody now is talking about the vaccines. You have a choice of one or two vaccines. That's 3 vaccines. It's Diet Pepsi. No, it's Budweiser, Heineken, or Schlitz. Right? Right. So everyone has 3 choices now.
Right.
But isn't that interesting that the whole world now has those 3 choices, and you're not permitted anything outside of that?
Right. So far, you're not. Well, I believe the AstraZeneca vaccine, I think that's getting, I haven't followed that a lot, but that's getting really banned in Europe. I don't know where that is in the US, but we have Pfizer and Moderna's 2-dose vaccines, and then we have Johnson & Johnson, J&J's 1 dose. But look, the messaging on this from the beginning, and this really was the Biden administration's problem, is that you have vaccines that aren't what Americans generally consider a vaccine. And that is, you take a shot that prevents you from contracting a virus that could make you really sick or even kill you. That's not what these viruses are doing. The 2 mRNA virus shots from Moderna and Pfizer, of course, this is the first time this technology has been used in immunizations widespread. But now we know that it doesn't stop you from contracting the virus. It only allegedly stops you from suffering really severe symptoms from COVID-19. We also don't know for sure, and Anthony Fauci has been disclosing this the last week or so, which was a surprise to me too, that you could still get infected with the virus, you could still transmit the virus. And so this is why you're supposed to wear masks for the next year or 2. Well, I'm not really sure that that was the bargain that Americans were looking for, that they were going to take what really is a risky, rushed through vaccine with unknown side effects. And of course, we're learning a lot more about side effects, but that you would still be forced to wear a mask and still worry about infecting other people. And so they really are the ones responsible for any vaccine hesitancy, which we see now.
Did you think last year, because you and I don't know if you could say we were cynics or skeptical, but the the first thing I noticed is that there was no economic models that were being given that were commensurate for shutting down a $20 trillion a year economy, right?
Right.
And I wasn't even, if I had suggested it on Twitter, because I like to suggest things on Twitter, right? I was immediately getting called like a fluist, and there was just all of a sudden I was falling into people's like this dichotomy. Either you're for us or you're against us. That's the way I actually felt. I know others did as well. Did you notice that as well also? Was you were either for us or against us?
Oh, for sure. I mean, this was a really divisive issue on the right. I mean, there were people I was friends with. We've gone through all the battles, with Trump, and all of a sudden, a few weeks later, you all these people at CPAC together, and literally 3 weeks later, you're at each other's throats over lockdowns. It was very highly divisive. So yeah, we were called grandma killers and greedy capitalists. And, why don't you care about old people? Why don't you care about young people? All of those things. And so, yes, I think that was it was a really tough time, I think, for all of us in that small group who were opposed to this from the beginning.
And it was a very small group, wasn't it? I think a lot of us can just name who are the other people. Robert Barnes was really good, right? And he kind of gave a lot of us air cover, didn't he? Do you remember that? He was very, very helpful. You were awesome because you were writing. You were actually one of the first people who actually wrote that I know of. You were perhaps even the first person who was even really writing with a very staunch kind of demand that we're taking, that we're operating under very imperfect information. I think that was kind of the way I took back. You're just operating under very imperfect, unpristine information.
Right.
Then Jordan made a kind of a business decision that he needed to kind of to really cover it as extensively as he did. I don't think Trump had, and to respond to M. Fox Hunter's, my take on it is I don't think Trump had a lot of alternatives. I just really don't think he did. I am very familiar with the pharmaceutical industry. I'm very familiar with the healthcare industry because of my own businesses going back. And I'm very familiar with kind of their lobbying and their efforts. And I've discussed this a lot with people, even, for years and years and years, going back to the Billy Tauzin days. He was a congressperson, and then he became the head of the largest lobbying group, right? And the pharma industry does $1 trillion a year in revenue. Were you familiar with that was the number? Did you know that was the number?
No, but I'm not surprised.
$1 trillion a year.
Right.
Half of those sales of $1 trillion a year comes from the United States.
Right.
Nancy, did you know that?
No.
Okay. So in 2019, they committed for their advertising budget looking forward, $10 billion for their advertising budget for 2020. So their 2020 advertising budget alone was $10 billion. And then there's an additional several $billion on top of that for Facebook ads, for doctor-patient group ads. You're buying something with all of that, and you're coercing Facebook to where the pharma industry is spending about $4 billion a year on Facebook alone. That's Facebook is making a lot more money from pharma than they are from my little measly account posting pictures of my new grandson, right? So,
yeah, but congratulations, by the way.
Yeah. I don't think Trump had a lot of choice, and part of my history is I've really looked at the timeline of what he's done, and then also in terms of what the Chinese Communist Party's done, what the international health regulations are, and I don't see that there was any way for him to optimize to win. In other words, I don't see that there was any way for him to optimize into a position where there wasn't going to be a shutdown, because people were reacting to so much fear. It was incredible. I was getting called a fluist all the time.
Well, we were getting called, other names related to that. But look, we were right, because this is, for the most part, for kids, not even close to as dangerous as the flu is for them. Certainly, it's a little bit more lethal for other older people. And now we know obese people, obviously people in long-term care facilities like nursing homes. But look, Donald Trump's biggest problem throughout his presidency was listening to the wrong people and refusing to get rid of the wrong people. The fact that Christopher Wray is still head of the FBI and that Donald Trump did not get rid of him back in 2018, or that he ever put him in that position. The fact that Gina Haspel was still head of the CIA, the fact that Dan Coates, it took so long to get him out as director of national intelligence. I mean, these were really damaging decisions that are solely responsible, accountable to Donald Trump. And the fact that he could not see through someone like Anthony Fauci, certainly Deborah Birx, who never should have been in the position that she was either. The fact he could not see through them, the fact that he let the Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, who in February said you don't need a mask, and then all of a sudden by April was comparing the deaths that we were going to endure to 9/11. You know, we were going to have a 9/11 every day. These were just really incompetent, irresponsible, reckless people who should not have been in charge, and Donald Trump should have recognized that. Now, did he have advisors who were telling him, you know, his close advisors who were telling him to keep them on? You know, Anthony Fauci became a rock star right away. I think they were looking at polls, what would have happened if he would have fired Anthony Fauci. And, you know, but we're still suffering the consequences of those really bad decisions for Donald Trump to keep those people in positions of authority.
Yeah, and so I've done a lot of Periscopes. So I did one with Michael Anton.
Yeah.
I've done 2 with Darren Beatty. I've done 1 with Amanda Milios. I've done 1 with Robert Barnes. I did 1 with Ali, who was awesome. And I know we've gone through so much of kind of suffering the vicissitudes, right? But and it's very unfortunate.
And David, my friend David Reboy.
Yeah, David Rayboy is awesome. We had such a sweet guy. He is jazz outside and inside, isn't he? Like the calmness.
He's such a great guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anton is great.
Yeah, and one of the common denominators is that they all feel that Trump's hiring and firing was poor, and I think Amanda felt that it started with Lance Priebus, that she
right.
you know, felt that it was kind of Lance Priebus on down,
right?
And then Michael Anton felt that he had a confidence in Lance Priebus, and it just fell apart. But it's very interesting. I'm going to go on because there's so many questions here, and I'm going to answer a little bit of this one because then there's a lot that I'm not going to answer. Thank you so much for joining us, Alexander Lorenzo, and that's a very nice picture. That's a camera that he's got, right? It's like a video camera in that picture.
Awesome.
It is pretty awesome. It says, hi, Adam, the Thucydides to our Peloponnesian War. Yes, so true. Did you know that's what I call myself?
I knew there was something Thucydides. I haven't read it, so don't ask me any questions about it.
Yeah. I've read a lot of Thucydides. Oh, boy.
I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah, I was born 2,000 years
too late.
Or maybe 2,000 years too early. I don't know. Time will tell. But so it says, hi, Alexander. I could have been born 2,000 years too early. You don't know.
It's true. We don't know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very exciting in the future. I want to live in space. So it says, hi, Alexander. Hi, Adam. The Thucydides. I have a little bit of a list. That's hard even for me to say. You know, I say it a lot. I got to practice it. The Thucydides to our Peloponnesian War. Do you have any desire to get into the fight and make changes? I see zero opposition forming. Are we at the mercy of the elites? Thanks for all you do. Do I have any desire to get into the fight and make changes? No, none whatsoever. Because I learned from Socrates, right? And I'm not ready to drink the hemlock yet. Not yet.
Don't do that yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the elites have definitely crafted a system that doesn't really permit any type of convening, right? People can't even raise their hands to count 80 million votes anymore, right? So we have a real difficulty with any type of a convening force. So I don't think that there is an opportunity right now for any real opposition to emerge. Mm-hmm. I think that's a shame. I think they're kind of, it is what it is. But my form of opposition right now is just trying to write the history of this, because I think it's really going to be valuable. I don't think people recognize how much things have already changed. I call that dark city, right? I don't think people have. I do. I definitely realize it because I started actually keeping my log in 2016. It's just that I now kind of made it a lot more forceful going into COVID and have a lot more nuances into it. But I don't think people have any idea how much their brains have already been rewired, how they perceive the world differently, how the concept of freedom, the concept of how to express emotion has even changed. The words, I've seen words even change that I'll give you a great example. So Clubhouse just hired some new person. I knew they were going to hire, who's very radical, very radical. She's hired to be radical, right? So, she's playing her role. And she said, I'm so proud to be part of this community. I forget her phraseology of it, but it just shows you that even the word community has changed its meaning.
Right.
So community used to be something that was inclusive of a lot of different people and different types of profiles and silhouettes and personas. And now it's exactly the opposite. Community is something that's extremely exclusionary, and you have to be permitted into this community, and you have to be kind of tolerated within it. And it's just interesting to see the way language has changed so much. I could go down the list of words that I've seen in the last. Trans used to mean something different 2 years ago, and people don't realize that the way they've changed the definitions,
right?
These things, but even transgender, if you take a look, but transgender, transsexual, the way they're being used interchangeably now. I don't know if you've noticed that, completely interchangeably. So it's all I can do is chronicle it, because in a few years people are going to want to see what happened.
Right.
And I think about it like I'm a boxing fan. I'm a fighting fan, right? So,
Okay.
So do you like boxing? Do you like fighting?
No.
Okay. Nancy does, so she can tell. MMA. So there's a point where, let's say there's two opponents, right, and they're fighting, and one of them has the other against the ropes, and they're pummeling them furiously, right? Their punches are coming in from all over the place, and their opponent is basically knocked out, but they're standing. And
right.
But the dominant boxer, the dominant fighter, is still punching furiously, kicking, whatever they're doing. But ultimately, soon they'll back away a little bit just to observe their own handiwork. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sense.
And they're observing their own handiwork, and they're admiring their own handiwork. They're like, wow, look at what I did. Truly like an artist, like Da Vinci walking away, getting 6 feet distance from their own kind of creation and looking at it and saying, wow, I did that, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to rate this history, and so right now I think the best contribution I can make is just in 10 or in 2 or 10 years, whenever it happens, when people want to be able to look back and see what happened. I want to be that kind of that source material, and I want to have that narrative, because I think a lot of people don't understand the narrative. I talk too much about it. I get excited.
No, I think that it's necessary, because I think we have a lot of people who have just operated in a state of shock for the past year. And so I don't really think that they're attuned to exactly what happened, all the details of who did what, certainly the long-lasting consequences of all of this. And this isn't just COVID and the lockdowns, it's the Black Lives Matter and Antifa, what those people got away with. Of course, obviously, election fraud. The fact that the Democrats and Biden got away with what they did in November, and that the courts basically put their imprimatur on all of it, that is probably the most consequential thing that happened in 2020. This HR 1, this broad election reform bill that the Democrats are trying to pass, they don't even really need to pass it. They got away with everything in 2020. They'll get away with it again in 2022. Look at what they're trying to do with this House seat in Iowa. It's already been certified, but the House Democrats are trying to seat the Democrat anyway, even though a Republican won, because they know that there's no consequences. And so we go back to the fact that one of the biggest problems in this country is there's no accountability for really bad behavior, for flouting the law, for lying to the American people, and that is why they will get away with whatever they want to. In 2022, these states can pass all the election laws that they want to, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, with Republican legislatures, but the Democrats know that they can get away with whatever they got away with before, and the courts, including the Supreme Court, including Judges Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett will not step in, do their job, and referee our constitutional protections related to elections. And so that is a pretty scary prospect as well.
So with Robert Barnes was always very critical of the selection of Amy Coney
Barrett. He was right.
Did you know he was right at the time?
I was questioning simply because he was raising questions, but I think his big issue was her basically signing off on endorsing Illinois' lockdown rule. And I live in Illinois. And so he was kind of saying, look, this is not a constitutional judge. Certainly. And so after Amy Coney Barrett came out and sided with the left, along with Brett Kavanaugh, on the 2 Pennsylvania election lawsuits that weren't even filed by Donald Trump, when they sided with the left and refused to consider those lawsuits, I tweeted out to the effect it matters, but that he was right, and he was right, and she's going to be a terrible judge, I think, jurist.
Yeah, I thought, I was unsure, but he was such an expert on it that he kind of he persuaded me that that Trump was doing it as a matter of kind of this ad hoc convenience, and he was right. So, are you surprised at the way the Supreme Court has made its decisions? Are you surprised that, for example, Pennsylvania, I guess, where Scalia had told them to withhold? And you have the better wording of this than I do, because I don't understand any of it. I just capture it and put it in my log. I make sense of it there. But so where Scalia had a decision and a ruling that Philadelphia had to do something that they didn't comply with. And then there was another Supreme Court ruling, I guess, or decision that they didn't want to hear the Texas ruling, that they didn't want to participate in the Texas lawsuit. Right. Are you surprised by any of those?
Surprised is not the word. I was completely disgusted. And it was Justice Alito, actually, who wanted Pennsylvania to segregate the ballots that were received after Election Day, because, of course, that was their unelected Secretary of State, Kathleen Buchbar, who has since left, by the way, strangely. She did her job, and now she's gone. And she's not an elected official. She actually was appointed by Governor Tom Wolf in 2019 to do exactly what she did. So Justice Alito wanted those ballots segregated. I honestly don't know, as much as I followed this, that they ever were, or that the Supreme Court ever followed up with Pennsylvania to take a look at those ballots or to disqualify them. But I was thoroughly disgusted that the Supreme Court rejected very quickly the Texas lawsuit filed by Attorney General Ken Paxton that argued basically that the Electors Clause had been violated because in these 4 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia, you had bureaucrats, really unelected officials and election workers, who were overriding, either violating or rewriting state election law to favor Democrats. And of course, this all pertained to mail-in ballots in all of those states. And so the fact that Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett sided with the left again to say that Texas, and I believe it was enjoined by several other states, I think over 100 House Republicans who joined that lawsuit, to say that Texas has no standing in or interest in how another state handles their presidential election, on its face is ridiculous. You don't even have to be a lawyer to figure out that that makes no sense. If under the Constitution, state legislatures are to pass election laws, and that will guide the election process. But you have secretaries of state, Democrats in Pennsylvania and in Michigan, who openly, flagrantly violate the law, and there's no way to stop them, say in Michigan, from sending out 7.7 million absentee ballot applications in total violation of Michigan election law. There's no way to get those back. There's no really way to disqualify them. And so you rely on the courts then to rectify that. And I just feel like when the Supreme Court in December just rejected that out of hand, now Justices Thomas and Alito said that they felt that Texas lawsuit had standing. But that, where did they go now? There was a really good piece for people who are looking at a total view of all the lawsuits and what happened with so many election lawsuits. The Federalist just had a really good piece out this week. I don't know who the author was. He's maybe new or not a regular contributor. But the Federalist has a really good breakdown of what happened with so many election lawsuits at the state and federal level, and how they were legitimate lawsuits, and how courts up and down, all the way up to the Supreme Court, refused to do their job and step in and make sure that the Constitution was enforced.
That was really interesting. And thank you for correcting me with Scalia. I guess I had Scalia on my mind, right? Really interesting. And
Yeah.
youre 2007, thank you so much for joining us and for joining us from YouTube. I'm on YouTube now also. Isn't that cool?
What did you?
I'm on YouTube now also. I'm on Periscope and YouTube. I know. It's like that. It is kind of cool. So youre 2007, thank you so much for joining us. And what a wonderful picture. Says, Chris Wray is also abusing his pulpit by not confirming the death of Officer Sicknick. We know he died of a stroke, yet Ray still says his death is under investigation. Really? He's been cremated.
I don't know that he's died of a stroke. I don't know what he's died of. I think his family speculated he did die of a stroke. There was some suggestion that he had some kind of pre-existing medical condition. But look, the DC Medical Examiner's Office, as I said, refuses to release the autopsy results. The family, I think, still does not know exactly what happened to Officer Sicknick. He was only 42 years old, so we're not really sure what happened. I don't know that they know either. But look, Chris Wray abusing his pulpit and his power is nothing new. This is something he's done the entirety of his taking the helm of the FBI. He now is, he's fully on that domestic terrorism and violent extremism is the country's greatest public safety threat. Of course, that's true in some aspects, but certainly more related to Antifa and the defendants that Justice Department refuses to prosecute, dropping so many cases, especially in Portland. So I guess his death is still under investigation, but they did arrest 2 people this week for the spraying bear spray. What they said, it was in the direction of Officer Sicknick. They can't connect that with what happened to him. But I can't imagine that it's still under any kind of investigation. This will just go away, just like every other lie that we've been told by the media and, quite frankly, by the FBI.
So that's how you expect it to be. I was actually thinking, I read a piece that Darren Beatty did in Revolver, and I was actually thinking about the images. The images were more impactful in their own way than the words, because I thought the images were really there was a vividness to them, and it just showed. It was kind of like there was 3 outcomes, and one of them was the FBI is distorting and acting as an obstruction. The other one is the court system is. I don't know if you saw those 3 images, or if you recall what I'm talking about. But do you think that this really just goes away, that instead of there being those images all expect some type of an outcome or some type of a resolution, and you think the resolution is that there is going to be no resolution?
There will be no resolution. I don't think we'll ever get any kind of report out of the DC Medical Examiner's Office. Of course, they can always come out and say they never determined his cause of death. I mean, the DC Medical Examiner's Office, you have to believe is as politicized as the FBI. They're working obviously in tandem on this. So we probably won't know. And now that they've arrested these 2 men charged with spraying bear spray towards Officer Sicknick, I think as far as the media is concerned, especially the New York Times, who planted the story and it was accepted as fact by every news outlet, I think that they kind of feel like, well, this puts it all to rest. Somebody was arrested for spraying bear spray. The public will just interpret that as that is what caused Officer Sicknick's death, and everybody just moves on. But of course, this is added to the heartbreak and tragedy to his family, because his death was exploited and leveraged by just the most by really just destructive, twisted people, both in political leadership and by the news media. And so they don't care what happened to Officer Sicknick. He served his purpose. He helped create all these visuals after January 6th. His death, the weaponization of his death, helped bolster the impeachment case against Donald Trump. And so now all that's over, and unfortunately they don't need him anymore. And it's really just a new low for the media and Democrats in this country.
Nancy, did you hear that was he a police officer? What was his role within what was his
Captain.
Okay, did you hear that a police captain was killed during the riots?
Yeah.
How did you hear that he died?
I heard that he got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher.
Okay, so Nancy is my go-to because she, like me, doesn't read. Neither one of us reads any of the news at all, right? Except I've got you, right? So she doesn't read any. I've got you guys to help me curate my reality, right? And she's got me, right? So that's what it is. And so Nancy just told me. So she's heard that it was Sicknick was killed by a fire extinguisher in the head. And with you and your friends, well, not with Nancy because she's kind of cool like that, but with your friends, will they ever change their mind about that? If there is evidence, if that didn't happen, will they ever change their mind about it, or is that already permanently imprinted in their minds? It's permanently imprinted.
Yeah,
it's permanently imprinted. So so you're right. There's no reason for it ever to go away, because for those people like Nancy's friends, it's already been resolved. It's already been resolved.
Right.
It's true. Right?
Well, and that's why the media knows they can get away with this, and the Democrats, because, and I'm not saying this about Nancy's friends, but you see what happens with tens of millions of Americans. They do not want the truth. Even when you tell them the truth, they don't want to hear it. The narrative, this is why Democrats are so shrewd at politics and why they're so good at getting their story out first. Is because they have a base of support. Obviously, the media will always regurgitate with whatever Nancy Pelosi says or any Democratic leader. They run with that as fact. Tens of millions of Americans who accept it as fact, they're sort of brainwashed, and no amount of reality will change their mind. You still have tens of millions of Americans who still believe in Russian collusion. They still believe that the Steele dossier is legitimate raw intelligence from Russia.
Why don't you believe that?
Believe what?
Why don't you believe the Russia? I don't want to call it a Russia hoax, because then I'm putting those people who do believe it as a kind of a co-conspirator, right? And I don't think that's fair to ordinary people that that don't look at themselves as participants in this thing, right? And they want truth just as much as everybody else. But so why is it that
they don't want the truth? They absolutely don't want the truth. Of course not. How could anyone believe that the Christopher Steele's dossier, a guy who was paid for by the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton campaign, who used quasi-shady sources, put together this dossier? It's not even a dossier. It was garbage series of memos that were never verified or substantiated. He was paid to do that. And that was the material that Jim Comey used to present to the FISA authorization to spy on Carter Page and the entire campaign and Donald Trump. They don't want the truth. I will totally disagree with you, because all of the evidence is there, that there's nothing in the Steele dossier that's been proven that's legitimate. Now, the people who want the truth will say, well, the Steele dossier was never unproven either. Well, that's just a preposterous thing to say. There was no Russian collusion. I mean, you had Robert Mueller investigate an imaginary crime for 2 years. He knew it never existed. Everyone in the FBI knew it was untrue. But yet they use that as a cover to try to destroy Donald Trump's presidency and take down as many people around him, including his son, that they tried to do, as they possibly could. So I'll totally disagree with you. These people that say MSNBC, New York Times, CNN gets away with it. These people are junkies. They will take whatever garbage, they will inject it straight into their vein as long as it says something horrible about Donald Trump or Republicans. And if it comes out a week, a year, 2 years, 10 years later that none of it is true, they don't care.
Okay, but why? And there's so many questions here, and I feel so horrible because now I'm going to just start. Everyone else's questions are going to get asked. but I'm going to just ask one last one. All right, is why is there no kind of intellectual effort then, or why is there no kind of inquisitiveness as to kind of what truth is? And these are not stupid people.
No, I wouldn't say that they're stupid people. I would say that they're ignorant people. I would say that a lot of them are lazy. They might be very good in their one aspect of whatever their profession is. But when you pick up, they still think that the New York Times is reputable, and whatever their news articles, their front page says that that's truth. They don't care about the thousands of articles that have been written that are completely untrue. Where's the outrage? This is why. Where's the outrage from the readership of the New York Times? Where's the outrage from the publisher, from Dean Baquette? Who got fired at the New York Times for making up stories about what happened to Brian Sicknick? Nobody. The readers don't care. They aren't sitting there saying, wait, I was betrayed. I really thought that this officer was killed with a fire extinguisher. I told all my friends and family. I believed it. There's no outrage. If those people wanted the truth, they would be embarrassed for being duped. But they're not, because it already served its purpose. Same with collusion. They still believe that some of them actually believe that Robert Mueller somehow was paid off so he didn't find collusion. The guy had every tool, every partisan prosecutor that he possibly could get his hands on. He couldn't come up with any evidence. And these people really think somehow Bill Barr got a hold of Robert Mueller and buried the collusion evidence that Adam Schiff said for 3 years was in plain sight. So no, there's something really wrong with a lot of our countrymen, and I'm not going to let them off the hook, because they are the ones who are fueling this on the ground level. They are taking whatever they hear from Rachel Maddow or reading the New York Times, and they're spreading that around on social media. They're as guilty as anybody else is.
Yeah, you're right. I was trying to be nice, but you're right. They are. I'm just, there's so many good questions here, and you're so awesome. So here's a question, and it's a two-parter.
Yeah, he's right. Rising Serpent. He's right. They don't want the truth. They don't.
Do you know Rising Serpent?
I do. Yeah.
Rising Serpent is awesome, and they've also joined a lot of the investor series. So you've got to do that also, because the markets are booming, and it's important. Your kids have to know that, and your kids have to tell their friends also, because we're seeing America change, and it's unpleasant. Because I'm a little bit nostalgic. I am, because I kind of miss the way things were. But for those people who never knew the way things were, right, it's a very exciting times. It really is. And I'm very excited about Space Force, about so many other things. So they've got to invest. So Rising Serpent is awesome. So thank you so much. There's a lot of questions here. So Angelo Defenders, this is a two-parter. And I like that image. Is that Texas? That's Texas, right?
It is.
That's Texas. Yeah. So Angelo Defender says, thanks to the Trump administration, we've been plunged into COVID fascism. And then they continue that with, he took terrible advice daily from Ivanka and Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner, yeah.
Jared Kushner.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that. I don't know that to be true. But look, regardless of who you get advice from, you are the president of the United States. You have to balance the advice that you're getting from competing interests. I mean, I worked in politics a long time. You're going to sit in a room with people who have different opinions, who have different views. They have different angles. They have different personal agendas. But the bottom line is this was Trump's decision. And I do think I've heard that Jared and Ivanka were more sensitive to polling that they saw. But this is ultimately, the old line, the buck stops with the president. And he should have seen this coming after everything that was thrown at him. I'm shocked that he didn't see through this. Maybe he did by mid-April when he was really trying to open the economy and open the schools, but it was too far gone. By that time, the CDC was already issuing guidance about the elections, the primaries, and you could see how they were going to get away with that into November. I wrote a piece in April or May of 2020. I called the CDC the 2020 version of the FBI in 2016 and interfering in our election. That's exactly what they did. And I'm just so much a part of me is shocked that Donald Trump didn't see that right in front of him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if I take a look at the timeline, somewhat, I see things a little bit differently than other people because I'm looking at it so differently than other people. I'm looking at a lot of timelines. And one of the interesting things is I try and imagine what Trump could have done differently, or, what positions he could have taken differently. I don't know if there was any actions he could have done differently that would have led to a better outcome. And I just look at the probability, kind of the statistical, mathematical nature of what happens if he does this and does that. I've watched history being rewritten and imprinted where there is no longer any culpability, any properties, any malevolence given to the Chinese Communist Party, period. Just everything has been complete. It used to be that history started with COVID December 31st, or maybe a little bit before. Then it was history started in February. Now there is no history for COVID before March 31st. And part of their kind of enunciating all these new type of variants, right, which would regularly be in the seasonal mix, I don't want to get into it too much, but is to create further confusion about origins and the differences of these things. They're really trying to not lie, which can just be rebutted and just can be argued and say that's not true, as much as they're trying to create confusion. And I think that that's part of what we're seeing also with announcing new variants and new strains that are coming out.
Right, right. Well, look, the CCP did not shut down the American economy. The CCP certainly is responsible for the virus and mishandling it and failing to give enough information. But look, they aren't the ones who gave the orders to shut down America's economy for 15 days and then for another 30 days. That was decision by the White House and, of course, by governors on both sides of the political aisle. The reason why Donald Trump should have rejected this advice is because the models that were coming out, Neil Ferguson's model out of Imperial College UK, and then Christopher Murray's model, was garbage data. There was not enough data. If you're thinking the virus really started, let's say, December in China and then made its way here, we know the first case was around January 20th of 2020 in Washington State. If you're already trying to plug in data based on what was coming out of China, and that's exactly what Neil Ferguson was doing, you have to reject that data out of hand. It's not reliable. It's coming from a country you know is lying. It hasn't been tested. The models hadn't been peer reviewed. Every step of the scientific process was completely ignored. As this man, one man, Neil Ferguson, who ended up then violating his own lockdown orders to go see his married girlfriend, by the way. And so he was a shady character to begin with. But the bottom line is the data that they were relying on was not tested. It was not valid. It was not reliable in any way. And it's unfortunate that President Trump or anyone close to him didn't point that out at the time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. These things bother me so much because I know so much. I study it so much. And I don't know if there's mistakes that he made. I think it's hard to say that Trump's biggest mistake was being Trump. And that's going to sound horrible, but he was not very good at, I thought he was brought into office to remember the way Michael Moore described it, to throw Molotov cocktails, right? And I thought he should have, the second he got in, I thought he should have just kept on throwing Molotov cocktails, and he stopped. And I've always been adversarial to the pharmaceutical industry because I understand it fairly, and I understand the difficulties that they created with Obamacare. And I was always against Obamacare, but I saw a lot of their lobbying with AARP and United. I'm very familiar with it. And I saw Billy Tawes, and I just saw so much corruption going on there with HHS. Boring stuff. I'm really into it, but. I thought he stopped throwing Molotov cocktails. The second he got in, after his acceptance speech, he stopped throwing Molotov cocktails. He should have spent 4 years throwing them. So I thought it's hard to blame Trump for being Trump. He never should have thought he was going to win re-election. Would have changed everything. Keep throwing Molotov cocktails and give up the idea of winning re-election. That was his vanity.
Well, I think that was the beauty, not the beauty, but that was the purpose of the Robert Mueller investigation. is they had him so much on the ropes from the very beginning. He should have fired Jim Comey at 12:01 on January 20th, 2017. He should have fired Jeff Sessions the minute he recused himself as Attorney General. He never should have let a person like Rod Rosenstein in charge of the Justice Department, which is what he did. He should have fired Robert Mueller, and he should have helped expose exactly what the entire Robert Mueller investigation was trying to cover up, which was Russia FISA-gate. And unfortunately, the only person who was doing that at the time was Devin Nunes. And he was even sidelined by his own party as they asked him to step away from the Russia collusion part of the investigation when he was head of House Intelligence Committee. He was pretty much working on his own, and they were trying to destroy him too. And so, look, Republicans made a ton of mistakes too. The reason why I think, to your point, there weren't a lot of Molotov cocktails thrown by Donald Trump is because the Republicans in Washington did not have his back. He knew he could not rely on Senate Republicans. Certainly,
Yes, I see what so you're saying if he throws Molotov cocktails, he still needs kind of the apparatus and the architectural party to act as the propellant, I guess, right? Yeah, that's interesting.
He could have fired Robert Mueller if he would have had the support of Mitch McConnell, if he would have had the support of Chuck Grassley, who was head of the Senate Judiciary Committee. If he would have had of course, they had control of the Senate. If you would have had every Republican senator, which of course would happen right now, imagine, the roles were reversed. He had no backing from Senate Republicans. They all were demanding that he protect the Mueller probe. They were actually going to pass legislation that would have prevented him from firing Robert Mueller. That's what was happening in 2017 and 2018. So he couldn't really throw Molotov cocktails because he had no backing.
I remember. It's an amazing thing. I'm fascinated by by what's going on right now. I'm so fascinated by it. I like calling it the fastest roll of power in history. Mm-hmm. I like, what Lee Smith wrote about the 30 tyrants. I thought that was really cool, right? Yes. Yeah, I know. It's really excellent. And I hope it turns out into a movie. That would be a really cinematic in itself, because I love that period of history.
It's nice to see a good guy like Lee get, his just rewards, which of course was his 2 books on Russia FISA-gate, and then turning that into the movie. So it's nice to see the good guys win.
It is. And so, but now we got to get into the questions, because I talk too much and I've got so many questions. We could talk so much. I'm so fascinated by this whole thing, and I've been pursuing you for a long time. So I finally got you, and I don't want to let you go. But I have you. Other people are calling for you also. Okay. So, Real Omar Sharif, thank you so much for joining us. COVID was a perfect takedown for Trump, tapping into his deep psyche and lifelong germophobia. Interesting, right?
I heard that too. That's actually a really good point, because he is a germaphobe. I also think because the epicenter of what was happening in New York City was happening in Queens. And so I think he took that very personally. He had a friend who died of COVID in April suddenly. So I think that to your point, I think that kind of fueled some of the bad decisions that he made. But that's a good point.
It is. And now I'm going to ask a follow-up. So, Real Omar, allow me to ask this in the spirit of your follow-up. January 6th was interesting because I felt that they had done some type of like a Spock mind meld type of thing into Trump, where they knew what he was going to say. Like they did kind of almost a predictive analysis on how he was going to react as part of their war gaming, because he almost fell exactly into their kind of a trap, and exactly what he said was kind of reckless. Maybe not in particularly just the words, because the words are, words have ambiguity, right? So they could play off on the ambiguity of words, but he's always a little bit careless with words in his type of persuasion, that they put him under a very stressful situation. They put him under a lot of urgency under that stressful situation, and they had an expected result, and he kind of walked right into it. That's the way I felt.
I think that's a good analysis. I think that's probably partially true in terms of whatever they were trying to set up. for him on January 6th, because of course he does. He seems to always walk right into it. But I do want to back up a little bit. Another big mistake, and this speaks to Donald Trump putting the right people and the right team in place. His handling of pre and post election illegalities, not having enough lawyers on his side who were prepared to not only make the case in court, but certainly make the case in public. That's why the Texas lawsuit was so good, because it really articulated all of the unlawfulness in these 4 states. That is what the Trump team should have focused on from the beginning. The Dominions, things that were harder to prove in real time, I think sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the messaging there. You had certain people who just caricaturized themselves after the election, trying to promote really bad, far-fetched ideas of what happened in the election. If they would have focused on what we knew was true, what happened in those 4 states, and proving those cases, again, not just in court, but to the public, I think things would have gone a little bit better for him. But it just did not seem like they had a really solid team in place in all of these states, ready to legally and publicly take on the election fight.
It's hard to compete with the resources that the oligarchs had allocated for this election.
Yeah.
Right? And for litigating the election, but also even in terms of that, like the war games that they were doing was just, they were literally doing war games. So it's just kind of interesting. I don't know. I don't think Trump was ever going to win. Did you ever think Trump was going to win?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You did? No, really? When did you think? Did you thought that Trump was going to win the entire time, or when did you think that Trump was going to win?
No, I thought he was going to really win, but I thought the Democrats were going to figure out a way to steal it, which is exactly what they did.
I mean, but let's not think of it that way. Okay, let's just in terms of thinking of winning or losing. And I understand, there's ways of qualifying and quantifying it, right? Because I'm in agreement. A lot of us are in agreement with that. But at the same time, just in terms of the outright outcome, and there's so many interesting questions here, but just in terms of the absolute outcome, right? Just quantifying it, just qualifying it. Did you think he was going to win, that he was going to be the president in 2022, right? Or did you think he was going to lose and not be the president in 2022? What did you think was going to happen?
What happened?
Me too. Okay, so now there's a lot of questions. Tell me what this means.
I thought he would legitimately win in the states where he needed to, and the Democrats would figure out a way to take the victory from him, which is what happened.
Yeah, it's amazing watching the moral corruption as they allow it to happen. I think I saw Mike Cernovich tweet out something today. I don't pay attention to a lot of these news things. I really should. I just really let it.
That's exactly what happened. They figured out enough ballots in these key states to give Joe Biden. Okay, so you're an analytical guy. Explain to me how in a state like Pennsylvania, there are 2.5 million mail-in ballots that were sent out. 2 million went to Joe Biden. In that same state, you had the statewide, I believe it was Democrat auditor, who was supposed to run for governor of U.S. Senate in 2022. Democrat, he lost. They had another statewide race, an open seat, Democrat, Republican. The Republican won, and not by a little, 200,000 votes. Conor Lamb's district, he was supposed to win in a walk. He barely won that congressional seat. The Democrat House Minority Leader lost his seat, a Democrat who had had that office for 30 years. There was a huge red wave in Pennsylvania. You have all the evidence to show that Joe Biden wins president by 80,000 votes. That makes sense.
I expected, it's just kind of sad, but I saw, because I'm doing all of this, like the fastest roll of power in history and all this reading, I'm reading a lot of philosophy lately, right? And I've reread and read Thucydides, Machiavelli, Discourse on Livy, so much other type of stuff. I did a Periscope with Michael Anton, who's like an authority, an academic on Machiavelli. And every single person, Darren Beatty corrected me on Hobbes and Locke, right? Which was kind of awesome because you're being corrected by the best, right? Kind of feels kind of
correct you on any of it, so don't worry.
Yeah. And then Paul Gottfried corrected me on the desirability of a monarchy type of thing. It was an interesting conversation. And I thought all along that they would not allow Trump to win just because of like the history I'm reading of this, but the history of also of moral corruption, just what happens when corruption has burrowed itself so deep. So John Heat, thank you so much for joining us. I recognize that image. They were with us with Michael Anton. I'm trying to remember if that is that Achilles? So let me know. I don't remember if that was Achilles. John Heat 5, thank you so much. Ask, what does this mean? What does this mean?
AstraZeneca disseminated intravascular coagulation. So he's referring to the AstraZeneca vaccine, disseminated intravascular coagulation. I think there's some issue there. I don't know if he has time to clarify. I'm not really following the AstraZeneca vaccine, to be honest. I've been covering more than Pfizer.
And then, so Patricia, again, thank you so much for joining us. And today was kind of a cold day in New York, and I'm just so happy to see pictures of rivers and warm. Isn't that nice, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. And Nancy, Patricia's here. So Nancy and Patricia are saying hello to each other. So Adam, we don't even have the choice in Germany. You get what you get. So in terms of vaccine.
Right. Well, I mean, look, we haven't really gotten into the vaccine issue. We'll get a little bit into that. We do have a choice, but the idea that the government should be bullying people into taking a vaccine that only has emergency authorization use. This has not been fully approved by the FDA and probably won't be for a few years. Under the emergency authorization use, you can't employers can't even force their employees to take the vaccine. And so the fact that you have Joe Biden and you have the media and you have all these Democratic lawmakers who are trying to push people who don't want this vaccine, bully them and shame them into a vaccine that obviously we know was rushed through. We're hearing all kinds of stories about side effects. They don't know the long-term immunization that people will have. In fact, now we're learning that people could still contract and transmit the virus. There's a lot that we don't know. But here's what's interesting. They just published Pfizer call between some of their top officials, top executives, and some bankers, some of their investors. And they were bragging how COVID-related business will help boost their bottom line by 41% in 2021. Without the COVID business, meaning the vaccines, their earnings would only rise by 6% in 2021. So, and now they're saying that they might need a third dose and they'll need annual booster shots. So everything that, again, going back to last year, February and March, everything that we've been told about whatever the issue of the day is related to COVID and lockdowns ends up not being the truth. And so now you have Pfizer, which also politicized the rollout of the vaccine, waited until after the election to release the results of their stage 3 final clinical study until after the election, and then notified the Biden campaign about the trial's success before the White House. And then Pfizer tried to deny that they were ever part of Operation Warp Speed, and then, of course, had to come back and retract that. There's so much at play here that people are justified in having suspicions about this vaccine. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all, but this is a different situation.
And so Andrew Feldman is here. Thank you so much for joining us. And are those strawberries? I think those are strawberries, right? Nice. Says Andrew Feldman, thank you so much for joining us. Says we are witnessing in real time the largest clinical trial in human history.
Yes, we are. No doubt.
That is amazing. I did not think about it that way. I thought about the absurdity of it, but I didn't really think about it in that way. It kind of fits into my own type of phraseology, right?
Well, these are experimental vaccines. I mean, how else can you, there's no other way to describe them. This mRNA technology has never been used before. They basically, Moderna and Pfizer used it. I think their study groups were about 75,000 Americans between both companies. So you're talking 0.0002% of the population. We have no idea what the demographics are of those people, what drug interactions they had, what other health issues that they might have. None of that has been studied. So Andrew is completely correct. This is a clinical trial happening in real time. This is not solid, settled science by any means.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. And I'm 54. I remember growing up with learning about, and I'm going to mispronounce it because I'm not good with these science type of things. Thalidomide,
Thalidomide. That's right.
thalidomide. And Nancy, you remember that too, right?
Yeah, with the baby.
Yeah.
And you probably remember that also, Julie, right? I didn't realize, I saw people, and I still see people occasionally that have improperly formed limbs. Right. I guess it is, and I want to be very thoughtful to them. So I'm not sure how to best phrase it. It's all meant in the best spirit, but perhaps it's called malformed or improperly formed limbs, or yeah. And that happened as a result of what Andrew Feldman says, the largest clinical trial in human history. I know that I'm not trying to map the two of them together because I'm sure that there's differences, but I do think about what's going to happen in 10 years when we're seeing consequences of this.
Well, we're seeing consequences now too. You have people who are suffering severe allergic reactions. I know people who have really been knocked out by the second dose. I know someone who ended up in the hospital after taking the second dose. I believe that the HHS agency responsible for reporting severe reactions, they, last time I checked, listed close to 2,000 people who have died from taking the vaccine. Now, this is all on CDC HHS website. So I'm not making this up. This is publicly available information. You have people, a lot of people suffering from fever, chills, headache, fatigue, joint pain. What are we taking a vaccine for that's causing these side effects that are as bad, if not worse, than the virus itself? So, I mean, it is a clinical trial. We are lab rats, all of us. Those people who choose to take the vaccine. I will not be taking it. But that's certainly what.
So let me ask you a question. And there's a lot of questions here, but I've got to ask you this because I'm so curious. So, but I'll tell, the next question is going to come from A. Martinez, HTX. Thank you so much for joining us. And I like that outfit that they're wearing, right? Isn't that cool?
Yes.
Yeah.
A little bit, yes.
And it's fashionable too. So, now I forget what I was going to ask. Oh yeah, what happens? But you have to take it. Are you going to have a choice, but not to take it? Today, somebody shared with me pictures in Israel of, and I'm not going to say that it's established that it was true or not true. So let's just look at it kind of theoretically, right? But of a section of a restaurant or some facility that was reserved for people who have taken the vaccine, right? Mm-hmm. And are you going to? So you're projecting that forward. Are you going to have a choice but to take the vaccine? If you want to travel, aren't you going to need to kind of have that passport that establishes that you've taken the vaccine?
I mean, I think that is the suggestion that some politicians are making. But if you're an airline, especially traveling domestically, and let's say you're forcing passengers to take a vaccine, and you have a whole bunch of people who take a vaccine and they suffer tremendous side effects, and you pin that on American Airlines or United Airlines. I don't think the airlines want that. In fact, I believe that they pushed back on that as soon as it was suggested. Because of course you can't sue the pharmaceutical companies. They have protection now until 2024. They have liability immunity.
Tell me what you mean. I have no idea what you mean.
They were under this Operation Warp Speed. HHS gave them what is called, I have it in my article that's going to be up tonight, but no one can sue Pfizer or Moderna for any damages from their vaccine. They are protected by the government until 2024.
Nancy, did you know that? I'm asking Nancy all these questions because neither one of us knows this type of stuff.
A lot of people don't know that. I mean, I just have been digging into it myself. So you have companies who were rushed through, got billions of dollars in U.S. contracts for these doses. Pfizer politicized the rollout of the vaccine. They're downplaying all of the side effects. Now they're telling us after 2 doses, you might need a 3rd dose and an annual booster, but yet no one's supposed to ask any questions. And you think and now the airlines think that they are going to force passengers to take this vaccine that does not have FDA approval, only has this emergency authorization use. This is really dangerous, risky territory, obviously from a civil liberties standpoint, but that's already been crushed. But from a liability, if you can't sue Pfizer, but United and American are going to force you to take vaccines and something happens, then sue the airlines.
Wow, that's amazing. So this is also, it's amazing. I told you I was excited about this. I was so excited about this.
Well, I hope I'm not getting myself in trouble by all this stuff. I'm sure I'm not.
No. I try and keep a lot of awareness to what I'm saying, right? And I'm also trying to keep awareness to what other people are saying also, because there's a spontaneity to it, which is exciting, right? It's exciting to see all these questions. And then there's also that danger lurking of how you answer the questions. So A. Martinez, HTX says, was Mick Mulvaney right about the virus? I'm not sure what that question means.
What did he say? I don't know what he said.
I don't know. A. Martinez, if you could share with us.
Look up real quick what I wanted to get back on the liability thing.
Oh, you're looking it up in real time. That's awesome.
Well, I have, sorry.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to get this question up here
from
Mihochi02, and that's a very nice picture. Also, someone, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Julie, are you looking at your article from tomorrow? Is that?
I am. It's still in edits, but I just want to pull up the liability.
Yeah, it's amazing. I had never ever, and Nancy, you had never heard that either.
Let's see.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing that people just have no idea. Oh, really? Nancy is in vaccine negotiations so that we can visit our son in Canada.
We still can't.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. And Canada is probably going to want us to get like 10 shots of everything.
They don't want to let us in with vaccines right now.
Oh yeah.
But,
and they're probably going to make us eat some of their crappy food out there also.
Yeah.
Like French fries with mayonnaise type of thing. They're going to make us eat.
That's right. Poutine. Okay. I can't find the link here.
Okay, well, definitely.
That is
yeah. And so Mihochi02, thank you again so much for joining us. And it's still a nice picture, right? It says never-ending goalpost changes from Fauci, zero credibility, continual lies. Why do people believe them? Question I have for you: why do people believe them?
I think there were just so many people who trusted him from the get-go. And look, admitting that you're wrong or made a mistake is very hard for most people to do. And so I think that people were invested in Anthony Fauci early on. They've done everything that he's told them to do. Now they're wearing 2 masks, even though he's been wrong about everything. And he can't be trusted. And nowadays he sounds more like a paid PR flack for big pharma than he sounds like a public health official who is looking out for the best interests of the American people. There was an interesting exchange today. Anthony Fauci and CDC Director Rochelle Walensky testified before Senate committee, and Rand Paul confronted Anthony Fauci, who was wearing 2 face masks, took them off to speak, put them back on. And Rand Paul said, why are you wearing 2 masks? You've already been vaccinated. So why are you wearing 2 masks? Why aren't you telling the American people, sort of your reward for getting a vaccine is the fact that you don't have to wear masks anymore? And instead of Fauci saying, yes, that's true, that's right, this is the message, we should be communicating to encourage more people to get immunized, he confronted Rand Paul and said that, well, we have all these variants, one in South Africa, we're not really sure if the vaccine is going to prevent, getting infected with that, so we still have to continue to wear masks. I mean, the guy can't even keep his story straight. And, why would you get a vaccine that you don't know if it works? You're wary about the side effects, but you still have to wear a mask and stay away from people anyway. His messaging is all over the place. And so that was a nice little confrontation by Rand Paul.
And so I see one of the interesting things, I'm not sure how much you're looking at the comments on your side, but they're really interesting when you can see people talking with each other, right? And I intrude in their conversations. And Jesse Matchy responds to Mihochi02 and says, normalcy bias, people still trust institutions. So I've noticed that and maybe you have as well, that there's a real adoration of Biden. Have you seen all the religious imagery that they've given to Biden, where they show his hands clasped and they show kind of a halo effect? They've done the same thing with Fauci, right? Where they've given him this kind of a religiosity, and this it's the same type of adoration, right?
They did the same thing with Robert Mueller. They had candles with Robert Mueller's face on it that people could burn. They were burning these candles, hoping that he would come out with his report any day or go arrest Donald Trump. So, but Jesse, to your point, and this picks up on something else, there's something in science called confirmation bias, which, as you know, so you were going to look for evidence that's going to support whatever your view or opinion is. And so I think, to Anthony Fauci's credit, he continues to supply quote unquote evidence for people to back up their confirmation bias on COVID, on face masks, now on vaccines. And instead of people taking a step back from someone who should be a thoroughly discredited source at this point, they still want to hear whatever he says about face masks. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about, what Nancy was saying. People don't want the truth. They don't want to look at the data that shows face masks do not work. They don't want to look at the observational data between places that had very severe mask mandates from the beginning to places that don't. And you have death rates that are basically the same, because you have a virus that is not going anywhere, because viruses can't be stopped by human hands. Only 2 or 3, I think, in recent history have, after decades of global immunization, and that would be, say, smallpox and polio. And so we're not getting rid of this virus. It's not going anywhere. It's staying here. And the fact that anyone thought we could hide from this virus in our houses, or that you can wear these terrible homemade masks made out of cheap cloth from China, is going to stop the virus is just defies common sense and logic.
It's interesting because people really do trust institutions, while I never really have. I think, I left school because I knew I wanted to go to Wall Street, and I left school also. I went straight to Wall Street after that, also because I didn't even trust the education complex. I thought that by the time I got to Wall Street and built a career on Wall Street, people would just be graduating from college, and I would have the job that they wanted, right? And that's exactly the way it turned out. I never felt like I was adequately indoctrinated, and that gave me a huge advantage. Why do people still trust these institutions when clearly they have been, they've lost any type of real, even a moral authority? They just don't even have FBI no longer even has a moral authority anymore.
Right. I wish I knew. I honestly wish I had an answer why people continue to put faith in institutions that don't deserve their trust at all. I don't know. I mean, I do think that there's something with overly educated people who have been taught to trust whatever the experts say. And so I do think that there's that sort of fealty to the credentialed class. Well, I don't feel that way.
When I thought things were going really crazy with Black Panther, when Black Panther, the movie came out, I was like, this is going to be a real big problem. And I know a lot of people who were very engaged with Black Panther, were very engaged in also Black Lives Matter. They're very well known on Twitter, and some of them actually voted for Trump, and they won't say it on Twitter, but I know they did because we talk about it. And it's just very interesting, because I think certainly in my lifetime, I've observed, and Nancy's, and I'm sure yours as well, that we've seen kind of the Black left go from being anti-war, right, and being anti-trusting of institutions, right? They used to be I remember when Maxine Waters was saying that the CIA was coming into the ghettos and was giving the kids crack to sell. And, just this kind of outrageous type
now
of.
I'm sort of thinking she might be right. Now I distrust institutions so much that I'm thinking Maxine Waters might have been right. Like, that's how. Yeah.
But now her and Sean, I don't know what these people's names are, but there's that character Sean something. He's really big on Twitter as he has a very Sean King. Yeah, they're very obeisant now to the intelligence agencies, right? And they are no longer, in fact, even concerned about wars. So the black left, right? The Cornel West, right? We've all listened to Cornel West, and people have mixed opinions about him, but he is definitely the black left, right? No doubt about it. He is the black left, super intelligent, real theology background, and he would always talk about the black anti-war left and the prophetic movement that he would discuss, and how now they've become the most war belligerent.
Right.
And it's just really interesting seeing the black left, especially after Black Panther, the movie coming out, now being the most pro-war, pro-CIA, pro-intelligence agency, pro-throw everybody in jail, pro-forget about any type of rights. I think Mike Cernovich was the first person I saw who tweeted an article or had his commentary on an article he tweeted out that said, look, they even don't want these January 6th protesters to have legal representation.
That's true.
Did you see that?
Yes, that's exactly right. They don't. Yes.
You were saying something about that before too, right? That they don't want to adequately fund them, and there's already kind of a few resources available to these capital city protesters.
That's right. In some cases, they are denying. Well, they're saying that they don't have enough public defenders because they moved all of these defendants into Washington, D.C. And so they're arguing their caseload is so heavy. Well, of course, they created it. This is by design. This is what the Justice Department wanted. Every case is being handled out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. And so, of course, they don't have enough resources. And of course, the courts are backed up. They already were because of COVID. And so they're continuing to delay these trials. And yes, there are not enough public defenders. That was the last report that came out. But look, this is again when the Justice Department was not held accountable to what it did to Donald Trump and his associates. The natural progression was going to be the weaponization of DOJ against regular Americans who supported Donald Trump. That's exactly where we are right now. If they could have done it to Trump, we were all saying, if they could do this to Trump, if they could do it to Mike Flynn, if they can do it to Paul Manafort or Roger Stone, take your pick. They're going to do it to, Joe Blow, MAGA guy, and that's exactly what they're doing.
I'm looking at some of the comments coming up. You've got some really good comments coming up. So keep drinking, pour a little bit more. Okay, so
all right, I got like maybe 10, 15 more minutes.
Oh no, you don't. That's what Amanda Amelia said also. Says lost in a sea of laundry as it's never done. So true, right? That's what Nancy was telling me earlier today. So Orland Park, Adam and Julie, been unplugged for a few weeks, reading my new books that you've recommended. Thank you so much. Julie, what books are you reading right now? And what are the books that you've really been enjoying to help you better get the vocabulary and kind of understanding of this moment? What's been helpful to you?
Honestly, I don't have a lot of time to read books. I have to be honest. I do have some books. I just downloaded a book about the 80s that I'm going to read. I read a lot of my friends' books. So I know Dave Raboy has a new book out, Kurt Schlichter's books. I have, what is the new book I have in Florida? See, I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I should have gotten some really good, impressive books. But because I've been digging, and look, my thing is, I don't, right now in this moment, to me, the old books, the great books, the philosophers aren't really applying to what's happening right now, to me. So this is such a unique time. And I just go back in my training in politics because that is my background. I worked in politics for years in suburban Chicago, worked on campaigns, and I did political consulting, communication, et cetera. But what I spend most of my time on is looking through a lot of these court documents right now, and it's pretty painstaking work, looking through transcripts of what's happening in hearing, pre-detention hearings, or looking through all the affidavits and the grand jury indictments. So that's what I'm looking at now. I tell myself I need to unplug and read more, but I am not right now.
Yeah. I've got a few books that I'm reading here in front of me right now. But I've always got this one. My microphone sits on this one. It's me and Ted against the world. My mentor, Reese Schoenfeld, who recently left us, co-founded CNN with Ted Turner.
Oh, okay.
And then he founded the Food Network. And he and I. I'm sorry?
What was his name?
Reese Schoenfeld.
Okay.
Reese Schoenfeld. He founded CNN with Ted Turner. Then he founded the Food Network. Okay. And he and I always talked about journalism and what CNN used to be something so much different than it is now. Yeah. And so I read a lot, but mostly I read a lot of Thucydides. I'm actually watching my own Periscopes a lot lately because Michael Anton, and I'll rewatch this one because I don't really get a chance to listen. I don't really get a chance to listen to them as they're happening. Yeah. Michael Anton had some awesome type of stuff. Darren Beatty, awesome type of stuff. Some of these things are awesome. I remember doing one with Dave. I did one with Dave Rayboy, right? And
yes.
I still think about the one I did with Dave Rayboy because somebody asked him about, I asked Dave Rayboy, what American propaganda is being kind of infused into Qatar, right? What type of, they have their, we have an open system so they can kind of flood us and buy our think tanks and do all the things that he writes about in his new book. But like, what are we doing to kind of counter adversarial programming against that?
Exactly.
And so I said, are we doing any pro-America propaganda? He said something I still think about. I think about it all the time. He said, well, what is pro-American propaganda now?
He usually knows how to nail it. That's well said. What would you say? What is pro-America propaganda? Well, it's white supremacy. If you're anything that's pro-America now is going to be labeled as white supremacy or maybe even domestic terrorism. I don't know. So that's a really good question. That's a good point from Dave. It's
a really good point, and he makes a really good point. He's like, what is pro-American propaganda? Right. And then and the way he articulated it was so elegant too. I mean, it's just really, really good. And he's like, listen, then it goes on with Michael Anton. I did one with Michael Anton where the question came up in a different way. And he said, he said, Adam, we don't have a shortage of propaganda here. We're just selling the wrong message. We have too much.
Right.
We have too much of the wrong type of propaganda. So this goes into that. So here, Knight says, are you aware that the Department of Defense is actively brainwashing its force in a partisan way with domestic violence extremism, stand down struggle sessions?
Yes. So I'm glad that he brought that up. That's something else that I'm looking into. They're trying to indoctrinate our military basically and everyone in DOD with this idea that what Chris Wray keeps talking about now, Merrick Garland, that the biggest threat that we have in the country is this domestic violence extremism. And in fact, there was an article that just came up today that said some people in DOD are alarmed because military people think that what happened last summer, of course, the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots, were as bad, if not worse, than what happened on January 6th. And military, apparently, DOD brass thinks that this is a real problem in the military, that the military should feel that what happened January 6th was worse than what happened last summer. Right. There's nothing to say to that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So what is the counter adversarial programming to that, though? The department, these departments have a lot higher budgets than any type of oppositional forces that you would get from little community groups.
Well, look, you saw what top military people, the Defense Department, was doing, taking on Tucker Carlson last week. First of all, they misinterpreted what he was talking about. And second of all, you have the military now wasting their time attacking a cable news host. I mean, Tucker's more than that. He's the thought leader on the right. But attacking him in the most misleading way, but also wasting their time. I mean, we have a serious invasion on the southern border. You would think that our top military people would be concerned about that. But here they were spending all weekend sending out stupid tweets and videos condemning Tucker Carlson. And so the hijacking of the Defense Department, which for years, at least people on the right thought was kind of our last vestige of not just conservatism, but certainly patriotism and protecting the country. Now we see that that's been hijacked by politics as well. And that's really disheartening.
Yeah, I snatch these things because I think I saw Jack Posobiec did a tweet, and he's like, if you know anybody who's in the military who is kind of going through this type of coercive indoctrination, send me a confidential email. And I know that he was kind of pursuing that. You know, a lot of this doesn't mentally process with me. I'm just kind of taking it in. So it's really going in one ear or in one eye, and then I categorize it. I put it in my thing, and I do have categories for that. I think in my COVID log, I call it. I forget. I have 3 categories, and I think I call them like white terror or something, because there's a whole big thing now about like, where Meghan McCain, whatever her first name is, McCain, from The View, the one who's on The View, whoever's on The View, said that she thinks that these white terrorists should go into Guantanamo. Did you see that clip?
No, but it's not surprising. So again, I'd like to see Meghan McCain explain to all these veterans who are in trouble for January 6th, you know, what her father's role is in creating these so-called insurgents or insurrectionists, all these veterans who are there. So, but
there's a lot of questions coming up, and I want to be respectful of your time. I want to be. I'm not going to try and trick you. I tricked Amanda. I'm not going to try and trick you.
No, you can't. No, you absolutely cannot. I have to look at my final edits for tomorrow. So that's my last job before I sign off for the evening.
Okay, Michael Anton said the same thing, and it went for 3 hours and 10 minutes. Okay, so
because we could pick it up another time. I promise.
You know who did that? Ryan Williams. We were doing a Periscope, and after like an hour and 20 minutes, he just disappeared. Literally, disappeared. Awesome.
I don't want to be rude, but I still have work I have to do. So
I know. So we're going to go through a lot of questions. So Rising Serpent says, and again, thank you so much for being here. Says, what do you think about judges ruling now in Michigan and Arizona that Democrats broke the election law?
Right. So I know I'm familiar with the Michigan case. I'm not so sure about what's happening in Arizona, but yeah. So Michigan, a state court there basically ruled that Jocelyn Benson, who is their Secretary of State, really unlawfully, as we know, sent out the 7.7 million mail-in ballot applications unauthorized to do that. And so I haven't read through the ruling, all of it, but I have it on my list. But yeah, so we're going to find out eventually some of these state courts anyway, or the state legislatures are going to eventually get through some of these other election lawsuits. And everything that we've been warning about since really before November is going to be found out to be true. But it's too late now. You know, I mean, we can't. Michigan always was, in my opinion, a long shot for Trump to win. And of course, he lost the state by about 150,000 votes. But Pennsylvania, as I said, he lost by 80,000 votes. Lost, I use in quotes. Wisconsin was 20,000. And I think in one of the lawsuits, the Trump campaign identified almost 60,000 ballots that they just knew on their own were unlawful. And so that's why what I said about President Trump really winning these states and then having these unelected officials, bureaucrats, mess with the mail to Biden.
And so we're going to go on, but I just want to, and we're going to thank you so much for asking our Rising Serpent. We're going to go on to this question, but before we do, I'm going to ask you another question, a follow-up to Rising Serpents. What lawsuits, what election lawsuits were you the most impressed with when you read that you felt that these, because there were many that Robert Barnes thought that were just junk lawsuits that were really creating problems with public perception because they were such weak lawsuits.
Yeah.
So which ones did you feel were the ones that were the most persuasive and that were, I don't know, the best legally grounded?
Well, I did think that about the Texas lawsuit, as we've already talked about. The 2 Pennsylvania lawsuits, one was filed by the Pennsylvania Republican Party, one was filed by the Republican state Senate president. Those were the 2 that SCOTUS rejected, thanks to Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. Also, the Trump lawsuit against the Wisconsin Election Commission, which we know that in both of those states, they were illegally curing absentee ballots outside of, first of all, the deadline in both of those states, and just unlawfully, period. So those were some of the better lawsuits. The Georgia lawsuit, there's been some coverage on that. I looked at a few of those. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. So my approach is what makes the most sense. You know, not talking about release the Kraken or anything that we heard that I think really overtook the real claims of election illegalities. So things like that, I really didn't pay that much attention to, but I do think that they were damaging overall to the messaging about what happened in the election.
So thank you so much. And Maureen Ken Ant, thank you so much for joining us. And that's a very nice picture, right? So it is, right? Very nice, very pleasant. So Maureen Ken Ant says, I had to cough a little bit. I had to cough and I had to do it kind of quietly, like I'm a real hero.
Nice.
Right? People will never know what I just went through. Okay, so Maureen Ken Ann says, how in the world was Biden the best person the Democrats could come up with?
Good question. I think that they thought he was the better chance at beating Trump over, say, Bernie Sanders. So, and I think that they knew this was also the gift of COVID, that they could keep him really in his basement. He didn't campaign a lot. He didn't have to hold any press conferences. He didn't hold a lot of public events. And so I think that they just felt like he was kind of what Lee Smith calls sort of an Obama avatar. And so I think that they also knew once he got in that the left, Obama's people, and of course Biden has appointed a lot of Obama loyalists, that they would kind of take over, and Biden wouldn't resist it because he's just not capable of doing it. So I think that was a big part of it.
You want to hear what I got to say about this? You ready for this? I think that, and I'm a Democrat, but that shouldn't imply my loyalties to anything.
Right.
But these things are legacy affiliations now anyway, right?
Right.
So with that being said, I even went on Paul Gottfried's YouTube to say that I expected Biden to win, and the whole thing as it did play out, but it wouldn't have made a difference who they were putting up. Biden was already understood to be kind of a ventriloquist dummy on the lap of the oligarchs.
Right.
And that he's a hologram, and it's still kind of upsetting to me when I hear people referring to him in the properties of a person when Biden is not even an administration.
Right.
It's not. They're not even thoughtful enough to make it a facade. It's just this very explicit kind of theater set piece that they're giving us. So we're going to go on Noodles for you, and I know we're going to be respectful of your time, so this is all on you now. So Noodles for you says FBI blasts pictures of January 6th. The media blurs pictures of illegals.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the pictures that the FBI are sending out, I tweeted a few weeks ago, they actually had a picture of a girl. She probably looked maybe 18 or 20. She was not committing any crime. She had a smile on her face. She had a Trump knit hat on. And the FBI tweets this picture out. If you've seen this person, please, call our FBI tip line. We want to know who that is. So they just keep churning out these pictures of people, most of whom are committing no crime. And it's just to shame these people for being at the Capitol on that day. They don't even specify what the crimes are. But yes, and of course, here we have an invasion, illegal immigrants pouring into our southern border, violating not just COVID rules, but our laws. And the FBI apparently can't be bothered with that at all. Not to mention what happened in Portland again last week, the attack on the courthouse and police officers too. The FBI is not, issuing all kinds of bulletins trying to track down those violent offenders. It has only been January 6th defendant suspect.
Let me ask you a question, and it's not something that's an original creation out of my head, because I think I saw Cassandra Fairbanks or somebody, might have actually been you. I'm not even sure, but why are they still posting images of these people? I even saw one today out of the FBI where they're like, can you help us find this person? Now, I come out of venture capital and I'm pretty familiar with certain surveillance technologies that are used,
Right.
Including temperature off of skin. There's just a lot of things that you can do, right? Voice detection. There's just a lot of things that you can do. Nevertheless, there is zero chance. And I know some of the technologies that are used in DC, in fact, and that are used in kind of betas within certain detection technologies, visual detection. Why are there? But they're still posting these images of people that they've already 100% identified. They know who these people are.
Right.
But they're still putting out these tweets saying, "Can you help us identify this person?" When they can tell by the person's skin, they can tell by the person's skin temperature, right? Exactly who that person is because they've been cataloged prior through Facebook or through social media or something else.
That's right. And so it's just to shame them. It's to shame them and embarrass their family and make a spectacle of these people, because of course the FBI can find out who they are very easily. So they released a bunch of other images and videos. I believe it was either late last night or this morning again. And so it's quite something to see what the FBI is doing. But of course, when you get away with what they got away with, when you can lie to a secret court, get authorization to spy on private citizens, never pay any penalty, I mean, this is why they have license to do whatever they want.
So Lee Smith and I had a disagreement that's going to go into part 2 of our Periscope. And I'm really excited about it because I feel that there are going to be camps, re-education camps. And I feel that, unfortunately, a lot of its inhabitants are actually going to be minority, economically disadvantaged people because white people are already white, right? So there's only so much you can do with that. While a lot of the volatility is directed at minorities and why are you voting along with Trump, right? And they coined a term God, I forget what it's called now. I forget what it is. It's in my catalog. Nevertheless, it's basically a term for somebody that's a minority person. Oh, multiracial whiteness. Have you ever heard of that?
Interesting. No.
Have you ever heard of multiracial whiteness? Awesome, right? Isn't that an awesome use of language? But when they say multiracial whiteness, that tells you who's going in those camps, right? It's not the white people. The white people are already the whiteness. We're already the whiteness, right? It's the multiracials.
Right.
So we're going to Lee and I are going to do a part 2 about this. So, but when you see the FBI, trying to shame and kind of shock and awe, this kind of shock and awe.
Yes.
What happens next? I mean, it's not going to stop there. What happens?
No, I don't know. I mean, they're just getting away with everything. So, I mean, this is basically them rounding up Americans, throwing them in jail. I mean, it's not a camp, but it's a jail. It's a threat. They're threatening their families. They're bankrupting them. So it's sort of that kind of version of it. So how far can it go? As far as they'll be allowed to go. And we certainly don't have any political leadership on either side. Certainly not Democrats will do it. They're egging this on, but Republicans too.
But so when you see what you were saying earlier on is that they were not properly funding the resources, public defenders and certain other resources that are given to these people from capital. Is this something that's now going to be a scalability type of problem that they can deliberately keep on misallocating or not putting enough into those funds, keep on arresting more and more people, and essentially you've got kind of like this effectively a Guantanamo Bay, maybe not with all the the violence or the explicit violence, but nevertheless, you've got that Bermuda Triangle type of effect where people can just be disappearing.
Right.
Is that kind of a natural progression?
Could be. I mean, that's a pretty good version of it, what they're doing right now in DC. There's no reason to handle all of these cases out of the DC U.S. Attorney's Office. They could certainly be handled in Atlanta or, Memphis or wherever these defendants are in Florida. So there's no need to do that. But this is a power play. And so this is to send a message to everybody, to send a message to 75 million Trump voters that this is what's in store for you if you attend any more rallies or you believe that the election was stolen. All of these things are now criminalized. And so it's not just about the people who were there on January 6th. It extends far beyond that.
And we're going to start wrapping up. So there's a few last
one more.
Okay.
I really have to go. I'm so sorry. I'll come back, I promise.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to look for one last question to close up on, right? It's going to take me 1 second. It might be this one. I'm going to see if it's going to be others. But in the meantime, start answering that one. And so Lance J says, of course it will just go away. And we're referring now to Sicknick, right? Says, of course it will just go away. What happened with the Vegas shooting, it goes down the memory hole. Is that exactly your expectation?
Yep. Exactly. I mean, people keep asking what happened with the Vegas shooter. What was his motive? What did they know about him? And, the people around him, his wife, etc. We still don't know exactly what happened there. That's just been buried too. That's what happens. And the media loses interest and they move on, like squirrel to the next thing. So that's where we are.
The two last ones. Watch this. Two last ones. Watch this. Noodles for you. Help me understand this question, right? And I know we're pressed for time. Help me understand quickly. Who put the pipe bombs at the RNC and DNC offices?
Right. So part of the narrative about January 6th was that someone planted pipe bombs outside of the RNC and the DNC in Washington the night before January 6th. So this was part of the whole insurrection. So they released this video. Actually, Revolver News has a pretty funny deconstruction of the video that the FBI released trying to look for this suspect. And Darren was like, this makes no sense. This wasn't a Trump person. Look at his footwear. This is not a MAGA person. This is either some sort of plant or this was all, again, optics to create more drama around what happened on January 6th. So we don't know who put the pipe bombs there. They weren't even really pipe bombs. I mean, they had like a cheap kitchen timer. It was not anything that was really going to be destructive. And so the FBI is pretending to look for this person. They can't find the person. I don't know who it is. And again, we'll probably never know. Yeah.
And so we're about to close up. And Architector is here. And Architector, you have puppies, don't you? Do I, for some reason, think that you've got dogs? Do you have dogs, Julie?
I do. I have 2 German Shepherds.
Nice. I've got 2 kitties. I've got 2 kitties. They're right over there right now. And Architector has shared with us.
Probably dying to go out too.
What type of dog? Is that like a setter? What type of dog is that? That's cute, right?
Cute dog. That is
a happy dog. That's a happy dog. Says multiracial whiteness, right? And that's the term. It's such an interesting term because it tells you exactly who they're going after. White, They're not going after the whiteness because that's white is white, right? They're going after what Lex Yusi says, which is white adjacent. Have you heard of that term?
I have not, but that sounds, again, sketchy. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more of it. So
we're going to close up. We're going to close up. And I'm going to press this button. And when I press the button, everybody's going to go away. By the way, we went 2 hours and 31 minutes. I tricked you a little bit, right? So
much. This was great. I would stay longer, but I seriously have to work for another hour and I haven't even eaten. I might just go now.
Neither have I. As soon as this is over, I'm going to run downstairs and get my M&Ms, right? And while I'm getting my M&Ms, Nancy's going to be. Okay, so I'm going to click this button, right?
Okay.
And when I click the button, everyone's going to go, all right? But you don't go anywhere. You don't go anywhere. You stay right here. So,
okay.
I know what I want to close with. Watch this. Look at this. Street is done. Nope, that's not it. No, this is it. Lance, nope, that wasn't it either. But I'll stick with that one because I saw another one that said you're awesome.
I did see that. That was nice.
Oh, how about this one? Lex Yusi says, thank you, Julia Sharp. She is. I've been hunting her down for this for months now. And it's so exciting because this is Periscope where we can kind of, we can talk about so much. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be gone soon. So I'm going to press the button. When I press the button, everyone's going to go away, but you, Julie. I still have you. Okay.
Then I must go away.
Yeah, we're going to go away. So I want to thank everybody so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. And thank you all so much for letting Julie and I be
Great.
the guest on your feed.
Thank you.
Fun, right, Julie? You had a good time.
It was so great. Thank you so much. I'll come back.
I know you got to. You've only got 2 more weeks. You've only got 2 more. Okay. So everybody, I'm going to press the button. Julie, stay there. Okay. Bye, everybody. Bye. Now we're going away. Bye.